Americans without health insurance is the lowest since Gallup began tracking it in 2008. Enrollments in the Affordable Care Act has resulted in the number of uninsured going from 18% in the third quarter of 2013 to 13.4% in April of this year. More than 8 million people have signed up on the healthcare reform exchanges, and many more became newly eligible for Medicaid under the healthcare reform law. The American Federation of Government Employees says the Social Security Administration is considering elimination of the nationwide field office structure. The union representing Social Security Administration field office workers obtained a copy of the report outlining radical changes in Social Security customer service operations. It was prepared by a government contractor, the National Academy of Public Administration. If the Social Security Administration approves the entire plan outlined in the report, 1,250 Social Security field offices could close, 30,000 jobs would be wiped out, and face-to-face service for Social Security recipients would end. AFGE says 43 million people rely on trained staff to help them understand the complexities of the Social Security system, and if this plan is adopted, Americans will be cheated out of what they deserve. SEIU Local 1021 is spearheading efforts to get a $15 an hour minimum wage question on San Francisco's November ballot. San Francisco already has the highest minimum wage in the nation, currently $10.74 an hour. The minimum wage in San Francisco is automatically adjusted for inflation. If the SEIU-backed ballot proposal succeeds, businesses with 100 or more employees would have to pay no less than $13 an hour by 2015, $15 an hour in 2016. Businesses with fewer than 100 workers would use a longer phase-in, hitting $15 by 2017. Democrats in the U.S. Senate are getting letters from North America's building trades unions this week urging passage of the Keystone XL pipeline project. The unions are urging Senate Democrats to approve the pipeline project either as a freestanding bill or as an amendment. Sean McGarvey, president of North America's building trades unions, says the Democratic Party has a long history of supporting America's middle class and its workers. McGarvey says now is the time for Senate Democrats to demonstrate that their commitment is steadfast and not subject to changing political winds. The Communications Workers of America say the May 7th Washington, D.C. Fair Trade Rally will show that the entire progressive movement is united with labor on the need for fair trade policies. CWA wants an end to secret trade deal negotiations, and it wants true fair trade policies to replace NAFTA-style free trade agreements that it says are bad for workers. The Fair Trade Rally is expected to draw thousands to Washington to demand that the U.S. implement fair trade policies for a 21st century economy that works for everyone. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This town is my town. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here tonight on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Gubernatorial candidate Tom Wolf going to be on the program. Also, Pennsylvania State Senator Rob Teplett's going to be here talking about the dysfunction in Harrisburg, also his support for his Democratic gubernatorial candidate. And for me, I got to be honest, at this point, I'm in the I'll take any one of the four that are left over Corbett, because the policies that Corbett has put forth, the direction he has taken the Commonwealth, completely in the wrong direction. And to me, I look at what this governor has done and the lack of leadership. Look, I'm the one big knock that I think everybody has is that he disappears. And from my perspective, fortunately, he's not really a leader, because when you have overwhelming majorities like the Republicans have here in Pennsylvania, when you have that kind of steamroller power, when you have that kind of absolute total control, you should be able to get your agenda pushed through pretty simply. You know, they like to say, well, you know, we got our budgets done on time. Well, that 1 year, not so much. But one would think that rational, reasonable, thoughtful, statesman-like politicians, people who put their constituents before their ideological party affiliation, that they could come up with movement forward. If you really believe the conservative ideology, which is more tax cuts, more deregulation, and all of that, and you believe that's going to create jobs, then you do more of that. And we have. Here in Pennsylvania, we've done a ton of it. And what it's gotten us is, well, less revenue, less money for other things that we need, like education, infrastructure, all the stuff we talk about, and also a loss of jobs. And it just makes me, just leaves me scratching my head. And I look today, for instance, there was a big rally at the Capitol. They estimate somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 people were brought in on buses from all over the drilling part of this Commonwealth to support the gas industry. Got to support the drillers. And, you know, as you read through the article, because if you looked at this, it was like a rock concert. They had big jumbotrons, they had huge speakers, had concert T-shirts, everybody was matched, and all the little groups had their own little signs, and oh, it was so cute. And you go, how'd you get that? Well, you know, the drillers gave it to us because there's a lot of money there. I mean, this is a huge, huge money-making endeavor. Understand that. But when I read the article by Donald Gilliland over at Penn Live, there was one sentence, one little paragraph, one little blurb, if you will. Not really a paragraph, but just a couple of sentence, maybe just one big run-on sentence with a quote in it that really grabbed me. I go, wow. Because, you know, you have a bunch of speakers. If anybody who's been to these rallies or protests, you know, some of the speakers are really very boring, very dry, and they read their speech poorly, even though they supposedly wrote it. It's the delivery's not really there. So there's really no energy that goes into it, no real grab of your attention. And there are some who are real barn burners, man. It could be anything, and they're going to light you up. They're going to get you all worked up. And the article says that. The article says the crowd talked among themselves during the droners, but perked up to boo the Delaware River Basin Commission, because heaven forbid we have clean water, and environmentalists who want to shut down our opportunities in the name of water quality and the environment. And for like 5 minutes, I just sat there and I looked at that paragraph and really? Look, nothing surprises me when you talk about conservatives, when you talk about right wing, anything. I mean, the people who said if you remember during the 2012 debates, and I do, when the panel, when Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs were asked if they should let someone die, you know, one of those Jumbotron questions CNN did, wow, should you let someone die? And the crowd cheered yes. Just let them die. Leave them out on the street corner. So nothing really surprises me. But you look at this and you go, you're talking about the one substance, well, two of the substances, air and water, that you cannot possibly live without. And I stopped at it. It just dropped me like this. Again, you go back to these false choices. And, you know, they had their little chants, you know, energy equals jobs. And yeah, if we had an energy policy, we could have more jobs. I firmly believe that if we had a true energy policy that said, you know, we're going to look down the future, down the road, and we're going to eventually get off the fossil fuel. We're going to do this now because understand, the gas, the drilling of the gas, has always been pitched to people like me who think we should be getting off of fossil fuels as that bridge. It's the gap. It's that stopgap between getting off of the dirty stuff and getting to the clean stuff. It's that bridge. It's that, that middle ground. We're working on it. But you sit back and you look at what's being set up. No, it's not. It's just another multi-generational addiction. Now, are those who say we can do this safely, and maybe we can. I don't seem to believe that we can. And I happened to be watching TV the other morning. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I flipped on the idiot box to put me out. And there was this company that makes PVC pipe. And I'm going, wow, why is a company that makes PVC pipe advertising on CNN at like 3 o'clock in the morning? And the commercial showed a guy who said, well, we dug up this pipe underground and it was, 40 years old, and he takes a hammer and he smashes through this, what used to be a steel pipe. He's going, corrosion and wear and tear and all this stuff. And we had to replace it. So we replaced it with this plastic PVC stuff, which is supposed to last guaranteed 50 years. And I go, okay, well, what about 51? What about 52? My kids will be alive in 51 years. They'll be alive in 52. They'll be alive, hopefully in 60, 70, 80 years, they'll still be alive. What then? And that's the thing that gets me. That's the thing that makes me step back. Okay, for today, we can do it safely. We'll put all this cement casing in. Here's the thing. My driveway, my house was built in the late 70s. The sidewalk that I have leading to my house, huge cracks in it. Gonna have to replace it. A couple 1,000-foot hole. I gotta wonder, how much cement's that gonna take, and can we dig it back up? So when you look at this stuff, there's long-term views, and I understand. Look, I understand the short-term view. We need the jobs now, and the Chamber of Commerce people and the drilling industry and all of these people, they get it. They know that, hey, here's the carrot. We're going to dangle this in your face. So you have to make the choice. Is it worth losing 10 years of your life? Remember, false choices. Every time we turn around, what are we being offered? We're being offered false choices. And for me, I keep going back to this idea that we need to make sure that we don't have false choices, that we demand there be alternatives. When I was in my first economics course, the first thing the professor said, and this was, understand, I'm older. I'm 46, so they taught economics differently back in the Stone Age, before the Koch brothers bought their way into most economics departments with veto power over the professor class. They taught it as, the free market was something that you had to be able to choose to abstain from. Yeah, in order to be free, you have to either choose to participate or choose not to. Problem is we can't choose not to participate in the drilling industry because it's our water, it's our air. Same thing with the coal and the gas and everything else, and the oil and everything else. So for me, when I look at the future and what we should be pursuing for our children, I ask the question, what's the vision? And I thought Obama had that vision. I thought the idea was we were going to be moving towards solar. Problem is that the industry with huge amounts of money has done an amazing job of destroying that. And now you look at this, they're going after net metering, and they want to charge people who have the audacity, the unmitigated gall to put solar panels on their homes. So they're going to charge them just for putting those up there because, hey, you've got to pay for the grid. To me, that's just another one of those roadblocks, another one of those obstacles, another one of those moments of preferential treatment for the well-heeled class. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show.
This is Berlin calling. Berlin
Sometimes it pays to listen.
It's May 6th, 2014, and this is Luke Vargas for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations, here to recap the day's top global news headlines in 2 minutes. At the top, you heard the voice of Axis Sally, an American-born woman who became the radio voice of the Nazis in the Second World War. Her last broadcast was 69 years ago today, 48 hours before the German surrender.
What Russia is doing in Ukraine and Crimea has a direct effect on what's happening in Asia Pacific. They've come with their long-range aviation out to coast California. They circumnavigated Guam.
That was General Herbert Carlisle, commander of the U.S. Pacific Air Forces, speaking Monday about Russian military activity around the Pacific. And Russia is not the only world power moving its military assets as uncertainty grows surrounding the crisis in Ukraine. 600 U.S. troops are currently stationed in Eastern Europe to participate in training exercises with their NATO allies. In Ukraine, calm settled in on Tuesday, but this has still been the deadliest period in the country since the departure of President Yanukovych in February. 4 Ukrainian military helicopters have been downed by Russian militias in as many days, and separatist activity recently sprouted up in Odessa, an entirely new region of the country. Separatists in the eastern city of Donetsk say they'll hold an independence referendum on Sunday, an event likely to spark further tensions in the country. Speaking...
My daddy was a miner, he's now in the heaven sun. Be with you, fellow workers, until the battle's won. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?
The age-old question, which side? And May 20th, you're going to get to decide which side you're going to be on in the primaries. And don't forget, May 20th, mark it on the calendar. You want to make sure that you get out and vote. Look, I don't want to come in on the night of the 20th or on the 21st and go, only 15 or 18% of the people bothered to show up. Look, right now, too important to stay home. So mark it on the calendar, big red X, whatever you got to do, on the hand, back of your hand, whatever, inside your eyelids, all that simple stuff. Anyway, big news out of Philadelphia today. The mayor, Mayor Nutter, signed an executive order saying that the minimum wage would be hiked for city contractors and subcontractors up to $12 an hour. That would go into effect January 1st of 2015. Right now, the city contractors, they make $10.88 an hour under a similar order. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes, because right now subcontractors aren't covered, and I guess there's a ballot question coming up, ballot question 1 on the 20th. So the executive order may just be moot. But to me, the minimum wage increase is something we should be talking about, which is why my next guest could be the next governor of our great Commonwealth. That's why I've asked Tom Wolf, the front runner here in the gubernatorial election, to come talk to us. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. It's good to be here.
So how's it feel to be the guy in front?
Feels great. I'm enjoying being the lead dog here.
Yeah, but not everybody nipping at your heels isn't bringing you back.
Well, no, I think when you have as big lead as the public polls show, I have there's going to be some throwing of darts, and I guess that's what's happening. That's apparently standard in politics. I'm new at this, but that's what politicians do. So I need to get used to that.
Yeah, well, I saw this one that just grabbed my attention, that you're the guy who destroyed the economy in 2008. I heard you were responsible for the whole economic collapse here in Pennsylvania, costed the Commonwealth 150,000 jobs?
Yeah, who knew? I know you're being ironic, and I was Secretary of Revenue in 2007 and 2008, so I'm not sure how being the Secretary of Revenue in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania could lead to such devastation, but evidently in the minds of some it does. And I think that's what that's the kind of disgraceful posturing that passes for politics these days, but I guess that's part of the territory and politics as usual, and that's what I'm running against.
Especially coming from someone like our governor, Governor Corbett, who has had an abysmal record when it comes to job creation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair in politics, to talk about things that have actually happened, and divergent ideas. And I think it's fair for the governor to want to proclaim that he's proud of what he's done over the last 4 years in terms of hollowing out our schools and destroying jobs and giving away the store to the drillers, and creating a crony capitalist state that is actually pretty amazing in its breadth. And that we all this in the name of austerity, that after 4 years of so-called wonderful management has led to what could be as much as an $800 million deficit that's looming for this fiscal year. So that is one tack, and I think in a democracy, what we have the responsibility for doing is pointing out how that isn't the direction that there are alternative directions, and I'm pointing out a different future for Pennsylvania. I think one where we actually invest in our schools, where we actually create jobs, not destroy them. That's what I did in my career. Where we actually take responsible from an environmental point of view, but take responsible advantage of the natural resource that lies beneath us, put a severance tax on it, and level the playing field, not create preferential treatment for certain classes of people or certain groups. And I think we do that, and we can manage the state quite well. We can have prosperity, we can have a great future, and we can have a political system that actually works. Those are two very contrasting visions, and I think in a democracy we have a right to point that out. And that's what I want to do, and I'd like to run on these competing, contrasting ideas, and I would hope that the governor eventually comes back to somehow trying to defend his record.
Well, well, in my opinion, it's indefensible, but we will see as the campaign goes on. I don't know how you go from 7th in the country in job creation when he took office down to 48th or 49th, depending on which numbers you look at. I don't know how you defend that other than to attack the other guy for whatever. And
right. I think that's right, Rick, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make, that there's a certain irony here, but if he believes that what he did was right over the last 4 years, then he ought to defend what he did. And instead, you're right. He's resorting to attacks, even against my Jeep.
I saw that. I saw you attacked your poor little Jeep, and what I found ironic is that he used a big monster truck to do it, and I kind of that very the stereotypical mentality of it just stopped me, and I'm going, wow, I can't believe they stooped that low.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, the politics of negative politics is one thing, but man, taking on my Jeep, that's a new one. I'm not quite sure what the point is, but it certainly is a new low.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because one of the knocks against you has been that you are a political outsider. This is your first campaign, and it's a pretty big. It's a really big, and in my view, one of the most important in our state's history. What do you say to that? You're an amateur, and that maybe you're not going to be up to the task of taking on the big league attacks that are going to come after the May 20th primary.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a reasonable question. I think we ought to ask that of every candidate who's running in every election. And I think in this hiring decision, we've got to look at what people do in any hiring decision, and that is, on the one hand, look at what people say they're going to do, but for a clue as to how competent they're going to be, or how ethical they're going to be, take a look at what they've actually done in their lives. So I've had a lot of things that I've done very well, and I think if competence is one of the keys to effectiveness, you want to look at what a person has done in his or her life to prove that competence, and the next governor is going to have to show competence in getting things done. So has this person gotten things done? Well, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I actually got things done in changing people to change from one form of cultivation of rice to another. I was very effective in my business, building a business actually twice. I think I was very effective as Secretary of Revenue. I was effective as an academic, got an award-winning PhD at MIT. So I've done all these things well, but I've also done them right. So I contribute, my wife and I, instead of buying fancy cars or big houses, contribute a lot back to the community, both our time and our finances. I drive a Jeep. I live in the same neighborhood I grew up in, and I contribute or distribute 20 to 30% of my net profit in my company to my workers. I've done things right in my life, and I've done them well, and I think that's the answer to any question about competence. It doesn't matter, how long you've been in a certain field. It matters what you did. And if you've treaded water, if you've drifted, if you've kept a seat warm, I don't care where you are, what experience you or what context that's there, what field that's been in. It doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy feeling about your competence or your ability to lead, to do the things a governor's supposed to do.
Yep.
My story's a good one. In my story, I've actually done anything but drift. I have actually taken the bull by the horns and done things well, done things differently, but I've done them well and I've done them right, and I think that's what we need to look for in our next governor.
Yeah, and your campaign, I mean, you've run a fantastic campaign. And if you want to know more about Tom Wolf's campaign, wolfforpa.com, the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Tom Wolf's name to take you right there. Let me ask you another one of the knocks that I've heard, and I've heard it come up a number of times. To some of your opponents and some of their supporters, the money issue. The fact that you're self-funding a large portion of this campaign. Then the knock being that, well, you're trying to buy the governor's mansion.
Yeah, and that's true. I am spending or investing a lot of my own and my wife's money into this campaign. In the same way, we've contributed to a lot of charitable organizations throughout our career and our adult lives. But in doing this, I'm trying to do this because I want to make Pennsylvania better, and I want to get my story out and who I am. Ultimately, the people in a democracy decide at the voting booth, and in that booth, they're going to decide whether they like what I've done or not. They're going to make the ultimate hiring decision. Typically, people who spend a lot of money on campaigns don't win because people don't like their stories. I'm betting people are going to like the story that I have. They're going to like the life that I've lived, and that's what's going to allow me to win. But let me point out that's the way Pennsylvania politics works today. My proposal for campaign finance reform is pretty sweeping. I want to actually change the way we do campaign finance in Pennsylvania. I want to make it possible for people who don't have a lot of money and who haven't been an incumbent or been in politics for a long time and don't have name recognition to be able to compete. I want to do that with public funding. I want to do that with caps on campaign contributions. And I also want to put into place strict ethics guidelines in terms of no gifts for people I appoint to the executive branch. I want to do that in terms of how contracts are awarded to law firms, all of which I think goes to trying to level the playing field, those things and other things, to leveling the playing field so that the game is fairer in Pennsylvania, and that access to the democratic process is fair, and that money has less of a role in the future than it does now.
See, that's the other part of it that you don't hear. I've heard the buying, trying to buy the election, but you don't hear the other part that you really want to change the system and really change the Commonwealth as a whole, right?
I do, and I think that I get frustrated with sort of side charges. I'd like to be judged by what I've done and the way I've lived my life, and I think that's fair. A person should be judged by not just what she or he says, but by what he or she has done in life. And I'd like to be judged by, for example, on ethics. I'd like to be judged by the fact that when I was Secretary of Revenue, I didn't take any of the benefits or any of the perks. I gave my salary back to charity, drove my own car, that ratty GPC. And that's the way I think public servants should operate if it's possible, especially appointed public servants if it's possible for them to do it. And I think that's how I want to be judged, by what I want to do, by my vision for a democratic society, and that's what I'm hoping the voters will look to when they make their decision on May 20th.
Yeah, we'll see how this all turns out. Again, the website, wolfforpa.com, if you want more information on Tom Wolf's candidacy. Let's pop through a couple of issues real quick, if you don't mind. The Delaware loophole is one of the things that has come up. Do we close the Delaware loophole? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, if I'm elected governor, I've been against the Delaware loophole since 2004 when I served on Governor Rendell's Business Tax Reform Commission. The unanimous decision of that group, which I signed, was that we should abolish the Delaware loophole, and I continue to be against that. I think we abolish it, and that's one of the things I would propose as governor.
Funding of education. Do we need another formula, whatever that may be? Because I've had a couple of people try to explain to me how education is funded here in the Commonwealth, and it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, we need a fair funding formula. I think the mantra for funding for education is adequacy and equity. We need to fund it adequately, which I don't think we are at this point. And I understand you can't throw money at any problem, but I think it's clear that we can't disinvest in something as important as education and hope to have a good educational outcome. So adequacy is important, but then, as you point out, equity is also important. We need a fair funding formula that takes into account the different challenges that different school districts face in the effort to educate our fellow citizens. And so I would be for both as governor and education, especially the funding side, but education in general would be a priority for me.
What about charter schools? What about especially these cyber charter schools, which we see report after report coming out that a lot of money being spent and seem to be misappropriated, however you see it. I believe the billboards and the TV and the radio ads is a waste of my tax dollars. Some people say it's just the business model. What do we do with the charter schools? 'Cause I got to be honest, at the beginning, I'm for the idea of innovation. I'm just not for the idea of profitizing my kid's future.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there are a couple questions embedded in that question. I think I agree with you. I think your initial instinct is right, that innovation and fresh ideas, new ideas in education are important. And we've always had these sort of specialized schools in the public school system that has allowed us to do that, so that we've had schools of technology, magnet schools, schools of the arts. There's some new charter schools that are being chartered by school districts in places like York County for international baccalaureate programs that no one school district could do on its own, so school districts are banding together. And it seems to me that those are good general ideas. Now, the problem is we have, I think, three things that I'm concerned with. The first is a general thing, and that is there's an effort to privatize public education, and that's a bad thing. I understand the market. I understand how a market economy works. That's where I spent my life, much of my adult life. But public education is a public good, not a private consumer good, and as such, it deserves to be organized differently. So the idea that we can go into this pure system that disaggregates the provision of public education in terms makes it sort of, wherever the consumer wants to go or send their children, that's fine with the rest of us. It's actually not. I care about the children and their education in Philadelphia, as well as the children in my own school district and my own children. We are all in this together, and that's why we all contribute to the provision of education around the state. It's a public good. Second, there are specific concerns about accountability when it comes to some of the experiments that are being carried out right now in education in this privatization mode. And some of those, especially some of the cyber charter schools, seem to have a different set of standards, if any, and a lower set of standards than the public schools. Cyber charter schools are being overseen out of Harrisburg, and the oversight just doesn't seem to be up to par. And a lot of the brick and mortar charter schools are being overseen by the local school districts who chartered them. And in many cases, some of these school districts, especially in the poorer school districts, don't have the means or the resources to do a good job of overseeing and holding these brick and mortar charter schools accountable. And third, we have a funding issue. The way we fund these charter schools is through an average head count, when actually that does not realistically reflect the whatever change in the cost structure for the host school district. This is a little esoteric, but there's a marginal cost difference. You take one student away from a public school, you really haven't changed the cost structure by much. And by taking the average cost of that pupil and sending that to the charter school, you're taking a lot of money away from public schools. And to the extent you do that with all these charter schools, you're really hurting the public school system and their ability to fund themselves. And then if the charter school doesn't work and all these students end up coming back to the public school, they have to take them back.
Yeah.
these are the three things. The effort to privatize is wrong. The philosophy is wrong. The lack of accountability for many of these charter schools, I think, is a crime. And the unfortunate way we fund it, Jack Wagner, when he was Auditor General, said we're taking $300 to $400 million a year out of our public school system by virtue of the unfair way we fund these charter schools. So there are a lot of things we can do to improve it. Innovation, we can improve things in our schools, but we need to do it the right way. We need to recognize this is a public responsibility.
I got to be honest. I'm listening to a businessman telling me we shouldn't be privatizing something. Kind of makes me stop and take pause for a second.
Well, let me just make sure that I am a big fan of the market, and I think we Democrats realize that there is a role for the market, that government cannot and should not be asked to do everything. But I think we've also learned over the last 40 years that government should not be expected to do nothing, that there's a role for government in a very healthy economy, and that we need to strike a really healthy balance between government and the private sector. The private sector does not handle market failure well. The private sector does not handle collective goods well, or public goods, or collective action problems, or public goods. And so government is necessary, and I think maybe it takes a successful business person to recognize the constructive and important role that government plays in a healthy, functioning market.
Last question I've got for you. And looking at the makeup of the General Assembly, how do you come in as a Democrat? And the hope is my hope is that come January you're the guy. I don't see the Senate and the House changing much. How do you deal with the division?
Well, thanks for that endorsement. I just don't mean to be, I don't want to be overbearing here, but that was a very nice comment. No, I think. Well, first of all, let's be optimistic that maybe there will be some partisan changes, so that we do have a Democratic Senate and Democratic House. I mean, let's be optimistic here. But if in fact that doesn't happen, I think whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, there are a lot of Republicans who are yearning for a better vision for Pennsylvania, and who would welcome a governor from either party who had a pragmatic and an optimistic vision that it would take Pennsylvania to a much better place than the place we're headed right now. Partisanship is important. I understand that, but I think there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who could be persuaded by a governor who just has a compelling vision. I'd like to do that, and I think that would be different than what we've had over the last 4 years. And I think with the again, getting back to my experiences and getting things done in a lot of different contexts throughout my life, including in Harrisburg, by the way, where I was in the cabinet and had to work directly with the legislature, I'm confident that I can get some things done. I can work across the party lines. I can work with people of goodwill wherever they come from who share my ideas about making Pennsylvania all that it can be.
Wow, you're a very optimistic guy. That's one of the things I like about you. And very gracious. I don't know that I would give the opposition the goodwill, but yeah, good. That's why you're running, and I'm the guy sitting behind the microphone. Tom, it's always great talking with you. I wish you the best of luck in these next 14 days before May 20th, and I hope folks will get out. Again, wolfforpa.com, the website. Tom, thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
It's always great talking with you. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. That's show where working people come to talk.
The bosses don't listen to their lies. Poor folks ain't got a chance unless they organize. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you? Which side? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?
Climate change, once thought of as a problem for the future, has moved firmly into the present.
Better buckle up.
This is not about frightening people. It's about facing realities that we face today.
Green News Report special coverage.
A street collapsing after a heavy downpour in Baltimore last week is one example of extreme weather events that may be more common in the future.
Landmark U.S. report from 13 federal agencies says climate change is here and now and is a clear and present danger.
All of those clear and present dangers straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
President Obama is going to do interviews with meteorologists all across the country about a new climate change report.
Hey, that's great. Even Fox News covered the new National Climate Assessment.
I hope they ask him about Benghazi.
Yeah,
like the weatherman from Montana should ask him about Benghazi. That'd be great.
That would be totally great. Ask him about Benghazi. Idiots. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, idiots, clowns, and deniers on Fox News aside, I have been whining for the last several weeks, last several months out here in California, where we are in the middle of the worst drought on record, that it has been so hot this winter, and over the past week, in the 90s, pushing 100 degrees in April. Well, it's not just out here in California by a long shot. Oklahoma and Kansas this week hit 100 degrees, their earliest moment on record hitting those high temperatures. And now the White House has a report that speaks exactly about these problems facing this country right now when it comes to global warming.
Yep, that is the upshot of the report. Climate change is here, and it's happening now. That's what scientists from the Landmark U.S. Climate Assessment Report say. It's a congressionally mandated assessment of the impacts of climate change here and in the future. It's led by the National Academies of Sciences, 13 federal agencies, and the Department of Defense. And it shows unequivocally that climate change is impacting every corner of the U.S. right now. Dr. Jerry Melillo, co-chair of the report.
It is affecting us in our pocketbooks and on our land in every region of the United States. It is changing the lives of farmers, mayors, engineers, town planners, truckers, and foresters.
The report breaks down these impacts by region and by economic sector to help public officials, planners, businesses, and individuals prepare. It says we're already seeing stronger deluges, more record floods, a longer wildfire season, deeper droughts, and heat waves are longer and more intense, just like Texas in 2011, Oklahoma over the weekend, and here in California, spiking our food prices.
And just as I've been whining about for months.
And it paints a grim picture of what's to come, warning that these impacts will accelerate unless we act swiftly on cutting emissions of greenhouse gases, predicting temperatures potentially could soar by as much as 10 degrees by 2100, melting Alaska and raising sea levels by 2 to 4 feet, threatening $1 trillion worth of U.S. coastal real estate and infrastructure.
And yet, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh today, and he says not only is none of this happening, there is absolutely no science to support it, that everything you're talking about, Desi Doyen, is based on computer model predictions for far, far out in the future. It's based on nothing that's actually happening today.
And, of course, he's absolutely, completely, 100% wrong.
How dare you?
The report also details actions that we can take right now to reduce emissions, but the political climate for action is a problem.
You think?
The climate change denial industry and Republicans are already forcefully dismissing the new scientific assessment, but White House senior advisor John Podesta says they'll fail.
They'll find various ways, particularly in the House, to try to stop us from using the authority we have under the Clean Air Act. All I would say is that those have 0% chance of working.
So if Congress wants to try to stop the president from taking action here, Podesta is saying he's going to use his executive authority to take action anyway.
Yes, and President Obama already has done so, and he is also going to issue landmark new rules for the nation's dirtiest power plants coming up in June. And EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy tells MSNBC there is good news.
The bright spot here is that we know that states and local communities across the U.S. have been taking action to reduce carbon pollution. So we can do this. That's what the president knows is our moral obligation to do.
And the clean tech sector is booming and already all over this. They're using the new report to focus on innovation and which tech sectors are positioned for rapid growth by addressing climate change.
But again, Rush Limbaugh says it's not happening. There is absolutely no science for any of this. And
these aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
Move along.
For much more on today's Landmark Report and all of the other stories we couldn't get to today, thanks White House, please check out our website, greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. You can and should find us and follow us on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
By working harder and working smarter, working with the employees in the Commonwealth, we made state government the smallest it has been in over 50 years. Promise kept.
We who have nothing, and most likely will till we all end up locked up in jail by conservative Christian, right-wing Republican, straight white American man.
Got an email during the break asking, did I just endorse Tom Wolf? And look, I've said this from the beginning. I've endorsed no one. The idea here is I want to have conversation. I can look at his campaign and say he's run a pretty damn good campaign and has a very compelling story. Truth of the matter is I like all the candidates I've had here on the program. I'm glad that they come and talk to us and they share their stories. Katie McGinty will be here tomorrow night. Rob McCord early next week. There's still time to go either way with this. I like them all and really for different reasons. One of the reasons that I like Tom Wolf an awful lot is, as he said, the business story, the story of his life, the fact that he's the guy who you see. I've known him for a couple of years now and been always very gracious, always very hospitable, always very nice. When he was revenue secretary, I had visited him a couple of times, and we had very, very nice conversations about his vision for the future. Honestly and truthfully, he's the guy I wanted to see run in 2010. He would have been the guy I would have liked to have seen beat Tom Corbett. I mean, you look at the campaign that the Honorado people put together. Bad, just bad, all the way around bad. But like he said, he went back, he saved his business, and I give him the ultimate respect for that. One of my knocks is while he went back to save the business, the Commonwealth went to hell. And we ended up with this guy who has done really some very, very, very destructive things. I mean, at the end of the day, you look at what this governor has done through his lack of leadership, his lack of vision, and really, just, hey, I'm the next guy. I was the Democrat slayer. I went after them and put them in jail for doing dumb stuff without any real vision. And to me, what it comes down to is he's been the flag in the wind. Whichever way the money says to go, that's where they're going. And the money says we want to privatize education. So what are we doing? We're destroying public education. The money says, hey, don't tax the drillers. What have we done? We haven't taxed the drillers. The money says don't close the Delaware loophole. You don't see the Delaware loophole closing. And I'm glad that Tom Wolf addressed that, because one of the knocks against him is, well, and damn, I forgot to ask him that about supposedly his company was incorporated or some part of it in Delaware, which, my reasoning for that is going, look, any smart business person is going to take advantage of what's in front of them. Now, if you want to go and change that, that's a whole nother story. And I'm glad to hear that he wants to close that loophole, which, then you stop and think about it. Let's say he did incorporate his business in Delaware. Is he not hurting himself by doing what's right? And the answer is yes. So for me, This campaign has really come down to, they've run a really good campaign. And the ideas. So we're going to see where this takes us in the next 2 weeks. Here we are. 2 weeks from tonight, we will know. 2 weeks from tonight, the polls will be closed and they'll be tallying up the votes. And what we'll be talking about here on the program is who's where and where do we go tomorrow? When do the attacks? Because understand and get ready for this, because this is what's coming. Mark your calendars. You know on the 21st, you know it's going to happen, and I'm telling you it's going to happen. And the only way Tom Corbett has any shot, the only way he's got any shot of winning in November is if he comes out with a ton of money on television ads. If he blows the wad early to close the gap early. Because understand, the momentum will be with the Democratic candidate. The momentum is going to be with whomever that is, be it Wolf, be it McCord, be it McGinty or Schwartz. I doubt it. I think Wolf is probably going to be the guy the way it's looking. If you believe the polling, again, comes down to who shows up. You know, it's one thing on the phone to say, yeah, I'm going to go vote. It's another thing to get in your car and drive to the polling place and pull the lever. The reason we play this game and the reason people are racing to the finish line is because it all comes down to who pulls the lever, which is why I say get out and vote. Everyone get out and do your civic responsibility, your civic duty. But in looking at this, you're going to be inundated with Corbett ads, and they're going to all be negative. Because there's, as I said, with Tom, there are no real positives. Okay, you balance the budget. Well, how did you balance the budget? Well, you balance the budget off of our future, off of our kids, off of our infrastructure, off of investments in new technology. You balanced it on the backs of workers. You yourself say, well, we've had the lowest number of workers in the last 50 years. But have our costs gone down? And the answer is no. And I've had these conversations with people who work for the state and say, yeah, well, that guy may be gone, but someone's still sitting there doing his job. They're just a private contractor. Which people should be asking, is that the right world? Is it the right thing to be having state workers being contracted out? And I think, in my conversation with Secretary Wolf there a second ago, he said, look, the market doesn't do really well when it comes to the commons, education, infrastructure, healthcare, things that are the common good, things that because I've said this before a number of times. Look, I don't want government agencies making tennis shoes. I don't want them I don't want them building cars. I don't want them building houses. I don't want them doing any of the commercial stuff, but I do want them making sure that the roads get built. I do want to make sure that my kid gets an education or the opportunity to get an education. I do want there to be health care available so that if I get sick or my kids get sick, we have the opportunity to go and be seen. Look, if you've got the right to see a lawyer when you get into trouble, you should have a right to see a doctor when you get sick. That doesn't take a whole lot of genius to figure out. So it'll be quite interesting to see where this all goes come May 20th. And like I said, please, 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 I'm asking, begging, you got to go vote. You got to get out. You got to cast that ballot. It's that important. It is the fundamental, it is the bedrock of our democracy, of this American experience, this exceptional experience. And by the way, get used to it, because the right wing, they're heavily funding their get out the vote activity. And I had Kurt called last night and talked about getting people to do voter registration drives. And I got a couple of emails from folks today going, hey, I remember when we used to do that. And there are groups, and a couple of people said, hey, we're doing it now. We've been doing it all along, and we go to the fairs and we go to to all the different events and set up our booths. And yeah, I have seen those. When you go into Harrisburg, especially for the the things by the river, be it Capona or Music Fest or any of those things, there's always the booths of signing people up. So I guess it was a little kind of a cheap shot on my view. Just kind of one of those things that that just grabs your attention, that makes you stop and think about what's going on. Let's go to the phone line, see who's on line one. How you doing tonight? What's on your mind? Hello, what's on your mind? I guess nothing. Again, you got to love when people call and then don't answer. I love that. Love it. Anyway, let's move right on along. Thanks for that. Again, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. If you want to call back and you've got a cogent thought banging around, I'd love to hear it. Our quote of the day comes from Simon Malloy and Salon from his May 1st piece. Regardless of what happens this November, inequality will push on into 2016 as a national issue. And I agree. Inequality is a huge issue, and it's going to be around for a while. One of the things that's caught my attention, you think of Don Sterling, the guy who, whatever you may think of, racist comment, whether you think it's the right thing to make him sell the Clippers, whether you think it's the wrong thing. I'm a little uneasy about making him sell the team. I would rather see the fans say, we're not coming anymore, and then end up having to sell the team at a rock bottom price. What's going to happen now? And, this is one of those inequality moments. This is a guy who's a multi-billionaire. He owns an asset that is worth $1 billion. He paid $12 million for it back in 1981. So you do the quick math. I mean, we're talking about, what, $988 million in profit that he's going to put into his pocket, and he's going to pay a capital gains tax of just over 23%. Whereas someone like you or me, we went out and swung a hammer for that kind of money. Not that you could, but if you went out and you swung a hammer making that kind of money, you pay a much higher tax rate. You'd pay the close to 40% tax rate, and that's one of the things that is really very, in my view, troubling. And as you look at this whole thing, and as you look at the money that's gone into this, back in a couple of years ago when David Tepper made the right bet to, which stocks to buy, made $4 billion in a year, and in that $4 billion, he paid the capital gains tax rate. It's one of those things that makes you just kind of scratch your head and go, what's going on here? But, here you go. A new poll out from CNBC. They point out that a majority of U.S. millionaires think rising inequality is a major problem. In fact, they say almost two-thirds of the millionaires, they favor the increase. They favor the money having to be paid. They favor raising the minimum wage. There's a lot of things that they're moving towards. Now you look at political affiliation. The millionaire class may be saying, as a whole, yes, we want to most certainly raise the minimum wage. We want to most certainly do all of these things that are going to help the economy. We want to pay our fair share. We want to do all of that stuff. But when you break it down by political affiliation, really a very different story. In fact, 86% of the Democrats say, yeah, we need to be raising the minimum wage. We need to be paying more taxes, higher tax rates as millionaires. The Republicans, less than 1 in 5. Now, you've got the Republicans who, according to this poll, 2/3 say that anyone who works hard in this country, they can be millionaires. A quarter of Democrats believe that is actually true, according to the CNBC poll. 4 in 5 Democrats support higher wages for the wealthy and a boosted minimum wage. Not quite 3 in 10 Republicans. So it kind of two very, very completely different worldviews when you look at this. Anyway, got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Pennsylvania State Senator Rob Teplitz. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they code to strip our rights away. We'll give them hell every time. This is a union down, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The Affordable Care Act has driven down the number of uninsured Americans. According to a Gallup poll, the percentage of Americans without health insurance is the lowest since Gallup began tracking it in 2008. A surge in enrollments in the Affordable Care Act has resulted in the number of uninsured going from 18% in the third quarter of 2013 to 13.4% in April of this year. More than 8 million people have signed up on the health care reform exchanges, and many more became newly eligible for Medicaid under the health care reform law. The American Federation of Government Employees says the Social Security Administration is considering elimination of the nationwide field office structure. The union representing Social Security Administration field office workers obtained a copy of the report outlining radical changes in Social Security customer service operations. It was prepared by a government contractor, the National Academy of Public Administration. If the Social Security Administration approves the entire plan outlined in the report, 1,250 Social Security field offices could close, 30,000 jobs would be wiped out, and face-to-face service for Social Security recipients would end. AFGE says 43 million people rely on trained staff to help them understand the complexities of the Social Security system, and if this plan is adopted, Americans will be cheated out of what they deserve. SEIU Local 1021 is spearheading efforts to get a $15 an hour minimum wage question on San Francisco's November ballot. San Francisco already has the highest minimum wage in the nation, currently $10.74 an hour. The minimum wage in San Francisco is automatically adjusted for inflation. If the SEIU-backed ballot proposal succeeds, businesses with 100 or more employees would have to pay no less than $13 an hour by 2015, $15 an hour in 2016. Businesses with fewer than 100 workers would use a longer phase-in, hitting $15 by 2017. Democrats in the U.S. Senate are getting letters from North America's building trades unions this week urging passage of the Keystone XL pipeline project. The unions are urging Senate Democrats to approve the pipeline project either as a freestanding bill or as an amendment. Sean McGarvey, president of North America's building trades unions, says the Democratic Party has a long history of supporting America's middle class and its workers. McGarvey says now is the time for Senate Democrats to demonstrate that their commitment is steadfast and not subject to changing political winds. The Communications Workers of America say the May 7th Washington, D.C. Fair Trade Rally will show that the entire progressive movement is united with labor on the need for fair trade policies. CWA wants an end to secret trade deal negotiations, and it wants true fair trade policies to replace NAFTA-style free trade agreements that it says are bad for workers. The Fair Trade Rally is expected to draw thousands to Washington to demand that the U.S. implement fair trade policies for a 21st century economy that works for everyone. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call our brothers and our sisters. And are you and I are win. You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets align, ain't no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on, yeah, we can do it. We need to revive, re-amp, and re-up the labor movement.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So an interesting hearing today in the State Government Committee, Daryl Metcalf, Mad Cows Committee. Again, when you've got no ideas, you just cause chaos. When you have no vision, when you have no plan, just cause chaos. The hearing today, and I'm almost not shocked, but the conversation is, let's have some division, let's have some divisiveness, let's impeach the Attorney General. I'm almost dumbfounded that, again, no ideas, no vision, no thought, but this kind of stuff keeps coming up. And the will of the electorate, well, look what they tried to do and take your right of the vote away. So they're just going to take away the person that you elect. Very, very interesting. Anyway, also today there was another one of these moments where you go, really, can we trust the folks that are in the Senate, especially our Republican friends? That's why I've asked State Senator Rob Teplitz to come talk to us. There was a really this resolution to put forth a study, an independent study of the Health and Human Services Human Services Development Block Grant Program, something that they agreed on and now kind of gone back on. Senator Teplitz, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Explain this to me. This I remember when they wanted this block grant. I'm personally not a fan of block grants. I remember being against it, but now I understand that the study that they said they would do, not going to do. Is that the gist?
That's really it in a nutshell. And to try to simplify it, last year there was an attempt around this time last year to expand the block grant program to the entire state. And many of us were concerned about that, especially because originally it was a pilot program, and a pilot program means you test something out on a small population, you analyze it, and then see what the facts and evidence conclude before you expand it to a larger population. So they agreed as part of a compromise for me to pull an amendment that I had to the block grant program. They agreed that they would run a resolution of mine that would do an independent study of the program. And to make a very long story short, we jumped through every hoop that they then placed in front of us, and they still won't honor their agreement. And so I felt compelled to speak up about that on the Senate floor this afternoon.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I'm not surprised. I'm sorry. I mean, I look at what's been going on the last couple of years, and nothing seems to surprise me anymore.
Well, I agree, and it's frustrating. I wouldn't think that this would happen, particularly because for this agreement, I had a witness. We confirmed it at a public committee meeting. We then worked with the majority on the language. We then jumped through every hoop that they had. And my bigger point today wasn't so much this particular piece of legislation, although it's important to me. It's that, if we can't live up to our agreements in the Senate, then the place is not going to be able to function. And especially in June, when things get fast and furious with the budget, we need to be able to trust each other. And it's hard to trust people when they go back on their word.
Well, let me throw the knockout. I mean, there are some who would say that it's not functioning now based on how things have been working the last couple of years.
Well, I look, there's certainly evidence to support that. I've tried to do what I can to help make the place function well, and part of that is reaching compromise where it's appropriate. But I'm not going to let myself get burned again on another compromise. What would they like us to do? I mean, I said today, you shouldn't have to have, a notary, a stenographer, and 2 witnesses in order to have people have to comply with their agreements. We need to be able to trust each other. And, unfortunately, not everyone takes that as seriously as they should.
Yeah, that's why I'm hoping this November there's a change and maybe a different vision. Which is why, earlier in the program we talked to former Secretary Tom Wolf, Revenue Secretary Tom Wolf, about his candidacy. He seems right now to be the guy to beat come May 20th. I understand you're a supporter of his as well, right?
I am. I'm delighted to see where Tom is in the polls, and I think he's going to do very well in the primary. I think he's going to come out of there victorious and lead our ticket in the fall. Not just win the governor's race, but I'm co-chair of the effort to elect and retain Senate Democratic seats, and I think having Tom at the top of the ticket is going to be very strong all the way down. And we've got a chance to get to the majority this year, and we're working very hard to make that happen.
Yeah, he seemed very optimistic. I thought very naively so. That there's a chance that the Democrats could take the House. Maybe the Senate, maybe you make it closer in the Senate. I just don't see a way, with the way things are gerrymandered and the way things are rigged, that the Democrats have a chance at the House.
Well, I'm not as familiar with the House as I am the Senate. Certainly they have a tougher road to hoe than we do. Right now we've got 23 seats. We need to net 2 seats plus have the governorship so that we have the lieutenant governorship as a tiebreaker, or we need to net 3 seats. And, there's a good path to get to those numbers, and we're working as hard as we possibly can to make that happen.
And then all of the insanity stops. Even with a governor, a Democratic governor, all of the craziness stops. All of the wanting to privatize the wine and spirit shops, the lottery, all of the no rights at work stuff, all of the paycheck deception, all of the right to work for nothing, all of that stuff stops. And then maybe, and this is just my hope, maybe we start talking about things that are really important, like putting people back to work, investing in our infrastructure, things like that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we've spent a lot of time during this administration as working families and their allies playing defense. And it's time that we play offense. It's time that we invest in education, invest in job creation, in healthcare, promote good government, and stop having to just fend off attacks against labor and against teachers and against women. And I think that the whole dynamic could change depending on the outcome of this election. That's why it's so important.
And that's why you think Tom Wolf's the guy.
Absolutely. I mean, Tom is going to be a breath of fresh air. I know him personally. He's active in the community that I live in here in central Pennsylvania. He's got the right mix of public sector experience and private sector experience. He's led by example on government reform, which is a very important issue to me. He's got a very strong government reform plan. And I think that having someone come in, give us a fresh start is exactly what Pennsylvania needs right now.
What do you think of the attacks? I mean, I've seen some of the attacks. I got to be honest, things that are 30, 40 years old, I think are kind of cheap shots.
Well, look, I mean, it's getting to that time in any campaign where, those who are behind are going to do what they think they need to do to catch up. I think that's natural. I'm not excusing it. I think it's natural. I have to say, though, and I like all of the candidates personally.
I do too.
But I have to say that the attacks on Tom on the racial issues made me very personally uncomfortable, and I felt that those were inappropriate. And so I agree with Senator Casey and Governor Rendell and others who've called out on those ads. I just don't think that those are appropriate.
Now, let me ask you a couple other things. The wine and spirit shops, I guess there has to be something. I mean, the way some of the people I've been talking to, the Republicans seem to believe there has to be something. They have to be able to call this a win. In the coming days and weeks, are we going to see a privatization move?
I think you'll see a move. I don't think you'll see legislation. I think it's something that they want to talk about for their own political benefit, but they don't have the votes to get there. They don't have 26 votes on a single plan. Every time they try to accommodate, one member over here, they lose two members over there. And so, our caucus, the Senate Democrats, are united on our modernization plan, Senate Bill 800, which would preserve the revenue-generating asset, preserve the jobs, preserve, our standing as a state that doesn't sell alcohol to minors in the stores and that has a low rate of drunk driving fatalities. Preserve all that, but still provide the convenience that the customers demand. That would be a win-win for everyone. The Republicans know that if that plan were adopted, it would take all the air out of the privatization movement, and so they've been resistant to that. But I just don't see anything significant translating into law. I think a lot of what you hear now about the Republicans working on this for the last few weeks is more for political reasons than for legislative reasons.
Well, that's good to hear on one level, but the other level is we're spending so much tax money, so much time and energy and effort that I think we should be putting somewhere more constructive. And again, it's one of those moments where I go, these are the people that need to go.
Well, exactly. I mean, look, if we spend the month of June this year like we did last year, endlessly talking about a pension plan that doesn't go anywhere and shouldn't, and a liquor privatization plan that doesn't go anywhere and shouldn't, then we'll waste the month again just like we did last year, and then the budget becomes an afterthought. Last year we got the budget, the very end of the month with almost no time to review it, and there wasn't much substantive discussion because we'd spent all sorts of time on other issues. And I just hope that doesn't happen again, especially this year because the numbers are so bad and such serious, critical decisions are going to have to be made that needs to be front and center, not the afterthought that it was last year.
Well, you bring that up, and the numbers are bad. There are some who say it's the decisions that this governor's made to give a whole boatload of money away to corporate America and to these state companies, and others are saying it's because the economy's just bad here and the tax revenues aren't the same. So who's going to be the one to bear the brunt of the suffering again? Is it going to be my kids with larger class sizes and no nurses or guidance counselors? Is it going to be the least among us, the working poor who can't afford to get health insurance? Who's it going to be?
Well, I think they've all suffered enough under this governor, and there's not much more cutting that can occur. And the problem that we have as a state is we've had 3.5 years of cutting and very little investing. And I think that's that goes back to why I think Tom Wolf is the right choice for governor, because he understands you need to invest in your organization if you want it to be successful. We need to invest in public education and job creation, and other programs so that we can save money over the long term. And this administration now just doesn't get that point.
Yeah, I mean, they're on their treadmill. They think their ideas are right, and they've been trying them and trying them and trying them. And at which point do you go, you just got the wrong ideas. We should try a different path. And I think we're at that point.
No, I agree. And if we come out of this budget, again with punishing the people who need our help the most, and without giving school children opportunities to succeed and learn, without helping those who need health insurance get health insurance on the federal government's dime, I might add, it's going to be a wasted opportunity, and it's going to put our state even further behind than we already are.
So given the numbers that you're talking about, I mean, we're talking a boatload of money that we don't have. Doesn't the Medicaid expansion make even more sense?
Absolutely. I think it's going, the hole is so deep, you can only fill it with big ticket items, and one of those is Medicaid expansion, being able to take hundreds of millions of dollars out of our budget by having the feds pay for the expansion of health insurance, and it's the right thing to do, aside from that. But the other one is taxing Marcellus Shale, and Republicans are openly talking about that now. They've been resisting on behalf of the governor, over the last 4 or 5 years, but I think there's a good likelihood that's going to happen, because they're so desperate that there isn't any place else to cut, and there's only so many sources of revenue that are out there that can generate large amounts of money, and that's clearly one of them.
Yeah, but how much what do you say to the person who says that the Republicans talking about raising or putting some type of a tax on the drillers now is just preemptive, because they know they're probably going to lose in November, at least the governor's mansion, and there'll be a push for a much higher tax than what they could probably get right now?
Well, I'm not sure I care so much what the motivation is, as long as we can get it done. Personally, my own position has consistently been, I would like to see a level that is somewhere in the middle compared to other states. Not the highest, not the lowest, but a reasonable severance tax, which the industry already has factored into their profit margins, and some parts of the industry, are willing to accept, and open about being willing to accept. So, if they think that they'll get a better deal now than later, if it's the right number and it can raise revenue and help us get through this budget, then I'd be open to it.
What's the right number? I talked to Rob McCord, and he said I think it was 10%. What's the right number?
Well, I'm just not sure that's a realistic number. That puts us at the top of the list compared to other states, and I don't want us to be there. I think we do need to make sure that we're not disincentivizing the drilling here. We should tax it at a level that's in the middle compared to other states, that raises revenue, that pays for the environmental oversight that's needed, and especially if the severance tax is going to be on top of the impact fee. I think 10% is I just don't think it's realistic. I mean, it's fine to throw out there, but I'm just not sure that that's realistic.
I like it from the perspective of it's a good place to start your negotiation. Or you shouldn't be starting your negotiation at, we'll take 5% and we'll negotiate at 5%, knowing you're not going to get that. So from a negotiation standpoint, that's where I'd like to go. Last question I've got for you. As we're looking down the road, the pension thing keeps popping up. We keep hearing about there's this enormous crisis. It's the end of the world. One is there really that big of a problem? Is this something Act 120 would have straightened out? And if we do have this huge problem, is moving to a defined contribution the right way to go?
Well, to answer the last question first, no. You have to solve problems based on what the cause of the problem is, and the structure of the plan, the structure of the public employee pension plans being defined benefit, that wasn't the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem is the state not paying its share. And Act 120 was designed to address that issue. And the governor wants to go backwards and reduce the amount of money that the state is finally paying. So, I think that that's a terrible idea. Republicans and Democrats alike think it's a terrible idea. Is there a challenge that we need to address further? Sure. Is it a crisis? No. They bandy around this number of $47 billion that would justify a radical change to the system. But that $47 billion, quote unquote, unfunded liability is the amount of money that it would take to pay out if every teacher and every public employee across the state retired on the same day. It's never going to happen. So, I think that there's a lot of ideology involved and not very much math, and we need to bring some common sense into the equation.
Which is why we need to spend more money on education so that we can figure that out math-wise. Senator Teplitz, it's always great talk with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. We're going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This is Berlin calling. Where Berlin calls, it pays to listen.
It's May 6th, 2014, and this is Luke Vargas for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations, here to recap the day's top global news headlines in 2 minutes. At the top, you heard the voice of Axis Sally, an American-born woman who became the radio voice of the Nazis in the Second World War. Her last broadcast was 69 years ago today, 48 hours before the German surrender.
What Russia is doing in Ukraine and Crimea has a direct effect on what's happening in Asia Pacific. They've come with their long-range aviation out to coast California. They circumnavigated Guam.
That was General Herbert Carlisle, commander of the U.S. Pacific Air Forces, speaking Monday about Russian military activity around the Pacific. And Russia is not the only world power moving its military assets as uncertainty grows surrounding the crisis in Ukraine. 600 U.S. troops are currently stationed in Eastern Europe to participate in training exercises with their NATO allies. In Ukraine, calm settled in on Tuesday, but this has still been the deadliest period in the country since the departure of President Yanukovych in February. 4 Ukrainian military helicopters have been downed by Russian militias in as many days, and separatist activity recently sprouted up in Odessa, an entirely new region of the country. Separatists in the eastern city of Donetsk say they'll hold an independence referendum on Sunday, an event likely to spark further tensions in the country.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I have some great news. You can now get the Rick Smith Show podcast on your iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, or Palm on demand and on the go. Get your class war to go by downloading the Stitcher app on your smartphone by going to Stitcher.com and search for The Rick Smith Show, or go to our website at thericksmithshow.com and click on our Stitcher button. Together we can, and we will, rebuild a prosperous working class and leave opportunity for our children.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Big news out of the Senate. And we just talked with Senator Rob Teplitz, another Democratic senator, Andrew Dinniman. Not a huge fan of Dinniman, to be honest with you. But on this, he's kind of right. The testing regime, maybe we should be stopping all of these unfunded tests. It's a whole boatload of cash that we're spending into school districts that don't have it. Still not a fan of the tests overall, but I think he's right in his assessment of these Keystone exams, which I guess by 2017 they want to tie to graduation. And as he said, and he's planning on introducing legislation to ensure that the 3 required exams are not tied to testing to graduate from high school, are not tied to getting that diploma. Really, it should be viewed as the totality of your work, not what you do on this high-stakes test, which I got to be honest, I would Christmas tree. I would write my name in it or whatever, just because I think they're just flat wrong. Anyway, it is National Charter School Week, and I don't know who did this, but it's also National Teacher Appreciation Week as well. So here to talk about both is a teacher and just an amazing education blogger, Jersey Jasmine, who does a fantastic job. JerseyJasmine.blogspot.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Jersey's name, take you right there. Jersey, thanks for taking time for us, man.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm good. Who did this? Who came up with the brilliant idea of having National Charter School Week with National Teacher Appreciation Week?
Isn't that weird? I mean, I honestly, I don't know. The Waldens have something to do with it. I'm not sure whose wacky idea this was. Teacher Appreciation Week it's been going on for a long time. It's a project of, I believe it comes from the National PTA, because so much of what happens in schools over this week, it's happening in my school, and I'm very delighted to have the parents come in and show their support, because it's not just about supporting the teachers. It's about supporting the school. Yeah. It's about getting the parents inside the school, seeing what's going on, having a little interaction with the teachers. And it's such a silly thing. They come in and they make us a lunch or breakfast or something like that, and it's such a sweet gesture. And I say silly because it seems like it shouldn't matter to your morale as a professional, but man, it really does. It's so sincere, and to kind of, I hate to put it this way, but I guess I will, to kind of overshadow that, to sully it by sort of sneaking in this charter school thing. Could you at least let us have a couple days where it's just about us?
No.
I mean, we're getting beat up as it is. Could you maybe back off a little bit just for 1 week before you get back on the jihad to kind of privatize everything? I'm very curious about that. Who came up with this idea that it should be concurrent. I'd really like to know.
I'm with you. And, but I look at the Teacher Appreciation Week, and I go, really, honestly, truthfully, how do we appreciate our teachers, especially on a policy level, by cutting their pay, cutting their benefits, outsourcing their jobs? I mean, if it were to me, I'd be saying, hey, keep your appreciation, give it to somebody else. I don't need that kind of attention.
Yeah, I understand that point of view. But as somebody who's, in on the ground floor and doing it all the time, I can't get too cynical about it. I mean, and every school that I've worked at a bunch of different schools, it's always been the same. This is a very sincere thing on the part of the parents. The parents really, forget all of this grassroots AstroTurf nonsense, all of this parent revolution garbage and all this stuff that has nothing to do with grassroots. When you're at the real grassroots, your local PTA, and you talk to the parents, it happens time and time again. They know what teachers mean to their kids' lives. They know how important it is that when a kid is struggling, they can pick up the phone and talk to the teacher about what's happening. They know what it means to come in for that parent-teacher conference and to really sit down and try to come up with a plan that's best for your kid. Especially, I'll tell you, Rick, it's the special ed parents. They're the ones who are the most appreciative for the time and the care of the teachers. And so, I hear where you're coming from, but at the same time, I've come to see it as a very sincere thing on the part of parents. So, I don't feel like it's a trade-off, but let's be honest, at the end of the week, we're still back to the same problems, right? We're still back to the fact that over there, your neck of woods in Pennsylvania, you've got a guy who, he's basically a target on the back of every teacher in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Tom Corbett is almost as bad as Chris Christie. I know you and I have this running argument about this, but I would say Christie is at the top of the list. Over in our state, we just found out we have an $800 million revenue shortfall because our governor can't do basic math.
We've got the same problem, 1.2 billion.
Yeah, so I mean, it's happening all over. Who's he blaming? He's taking it right out on the teachers, all the public employees. He doesn't mention all of these games that he's playing where he pushes payments back. And this is one of the things they're talking about now is we already take 2 state aid payments and we push them into the next year. This has been going on for years. Can't blame Christie for that. Now we want to do it with 3. And, where does it end? At what point do you finally stop and say, hey, wait a minute, there are too many people who are making boatloads of money and paying very little in taxes, and this has been going on for too long, and now it's time to right the ship and to start demanding that the people who have been making all of the money actually start paying their certified fair share, so that not just the teachers and cops and firefighters and everybody else can have decent middle-class lives, but so we can get our fiscal house in order. I can't remember the exact quote. I wish I had it in front of me. But even the Commissioner of Education over here, David Hesby, who took over for Chris Cerf, even he was saying there's not really anything left to cut. I mean, we're down to the bone over here. When the cuts that are going to be made now are real, and they're substantial, and they're going to cause real damage to the lives of teachers and to the lives of children. And at some point, we're going to have to be honest about the fix that we're in and say we've got to start either going after some of these corporate tax subsidies, which have gotten out of control in states like Pennsylvania and New York, or we're going to have to start raising revenue on the people who have been getting away with paying very low taxes because we have regressive taxes at the state and local level in this country, or some combination of both. We're going to have to be honest about this.
No, we can't. We've got to protect our billionaire class. And I saw in one of your articles over at jerseyjasmine.blogspot.com, you talked about David Tepper, one of the billionaires, and it's odd. Just a minute ago, I had mentioned his name. The one year he placed the right bet. He bet that we were going to bail out the banks, and he made about $4 billion, to which he paid a lower tax rate than people swinging a hammer or driving a truck. And I simply said, I think that's wrong. I think it's flat wrong that we encourage gambling over working.
Isn't that? Yeah, I mean that's a very good way to put it, because I think Jon Stewart used a similar line. It's like we're capitalizing his adventure, you know, and that's really what's happening with a lot of these hedge fund guys. If you look, I think Dan Wright, who writes at Firedog Lake, a bunch of other places, he keeps a good eye here on New Jersey. Written a lot of good pieces. He unearthed the tape of Tepper on MSNBC. And when you hear the host talking, it's obvious that this was a big coup to get him on the show, because he's not like a Donald Trump kind of media whore. He's a little reluctant to get out there.
Right.
So he comes on the show and he's talking about how he made this money. And look, I'm no financial genius, but from what I'm understanding, it's basically that the government made a promise to overpay on failed bank stocks, that the market said those failed bank stocks were worth something. The government issued a white paper and said it would pay, $4 or $5 more a share, and he essentially set up himself in a position where, he capitalized on that.
Yep.
Okay, perfectly legal from what I understand.
Right place, right time.
Yeah, but can somebody explain to me what the societal value of that is? What did that do for anybody? Like, I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but I will in this one case. I go to work every day, and I know that a kid's going to come through my door, and I'm going to teach them music, and I'm going to teach them something that's going to add some value in their lives, and I could show you all the studies that show that studying music has high correlation to high academic achievement and other things. But really, I do it mostly because I think people need beauty and art in their lives, and it enrich their lives. So at the end of the day, I say, okay, that's what I did. What was the point of that? What did we gain as a society? Again, perfectly legal and ethical as far as it goes. But what was the point? If we can't really well define that, why are we giving a preferential tax to it? I'm not sophisticated enough that I could argue for or against doing it or allowing these sort of transactions to occur. But why do they occur and then occur under a tax system where the people who do this get preferential treatment under capital gains laws? I honestly cannot figure that one out, Rick. And yet, here we are, and what is the money being used for? But to, go out and sell for particular ideological agendas.
And use that money.
What do I know?
Yeah, and use that money to destroy the commons, our education system, because he's one of the guys out there, is like a number of them, who see the opportunity of profiting off of education. And the other part of it is, the God complex. I know better than all of you I know better than you teachers on how to educate and what our children need. And it really, to me, that's part of it as well. The profit, yes, but that God complex, that we were able to do this, so we can do anything.
Yeah, the guy, I see that more from his gait.
Yeah.
Because he's always on talking about stuff. I love that he comes out and he says, we don't have any good research about education. I'm up to my butt, Rick. And I'm in a doctoral program at Rutgers. I read education research all the time. I can't keep up with it. No one can keep up with it. There's piles of the stuff that keeps coming out, and yet, somebody gets up there and says, oh, I know what's going on. Tepper is a interesting sort of case, because the few times that he's been interviewed on this, he really hasn't had much of an agenda. And the group that he brought in, their big thing was to get tenure reform. Okay, we passed a law in New Jersey. It was mostly aligned with what the teachers union here, the largest teachers union, the NJEA wanted, but some of the other kind of reformy things snuck in. What else did you want beside that? And in fact, I've read interviews where he said, well, what do you think about charter schools? I'm not sure. What do you think about vouchers? Well, I guess maybe kind of. There's no clear definition of what somebody like that, at least as far as I can see, really wants to do. So I kind of wonder sometimes with, billionaires if it's like a shiny plaything, and you put like a ball of foil in front of a cat, and they sort of run after it, and then you get out the laser pointer, and that's more interesting. So the cat goes over to that, and what's the next big thing that's going to catch everybody's eye? I kind of wonder with a couple of guys that maybe that's what's going on here.
So basically, what you're talking about is it's just it's country club banter, and let's have you ever seen the movie? What was it? 48 Hours?
Yeah.
Not 48 Hours. Trading Places. Where they bet a whopping $1 over that they can destroy. Is this what we're talking about? They're just seeing if they can either make or break public education based on a $1 bet.
That's a really funny analogy. And it's funny because I was thinking about that movie the other day, something completely unrelated. But there is kind of what's the word? Insouciance that I think goes on, and I find that it goes on in a lot of aspects of education reform or reforminess. This sort of idea that we're kind of, we'll just try this, we'll see what happens. Doesn't matter if you're going to, fire teachers who should not have been fired and ruin their lives. Doesn't matter if you're going to put kids into charter schools where, they won't do any better, and in fact they'll be, segregated most likely on the basis of any number of other things. Doesn't matter if we sell assets like we're selling in Newark, that we sell schools, then we can't get back. Let's just try it. Let's just see what happens. It's a very bizarre kind of like it's like dropping bombs from 40,000 feet, and you're removed from it. You can't see the damage that you're doing. And part of what people like you, people like me have to do is sort of grab people by their collars and drag them down and say, look at what you are doing. This is not something you can just kind of brush away.
Right. Or like I say to my wife, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah. The worst thing that could happen is the worst thing that could happen, So, which is, sometimes is pretty bad. So, we got to be, we have to be more honest about the consequences of some of these things. And the people who are funding this stuff ought to own up to the consequences of some of the things that they're doing if they're going to be intellectually honest about what it is that they're trying to push.
So we're looking at this National Charter School Appreciation Week, and I've been kind of interested in a kind of bring the bodies closer traffic accident kind of way of the people sending out messages about why the charter schools are important to them. The kid with the 2 screens, the one that he's doing his homework on, and the one that he's cheating on.
That's good. Yeah, right.
All of these things that make me go, is this the future of education? Is the future more isolation? I look at these cyber charter schools, and these really concern me because I got to be honest, as someone who has taken a number of online courses in my life, I see almost no value in online education at all. Let alone basing my kid's entire K through 12 education based on some bizarre online model that maybe they do it or maybe they don't.
Yeah, that is an excellent example of what I'm talking about when I say that there's a whole bunch of research out there and no one seems to want to talk about it, because there's been an enormous trend in well over 20 years, probably 30 years, in learning, cognition, instruction, development sort of research, where it's become pretty much the consensus.
So you just lost everybody. With what you just said, you just lost everybody. Nobody knows what you just said.
There's a bunch of nerdy people in colleges who study how we learn, right?
All right, got that.
They're like the cast of The Big Bang Theory, only for education, right?
All right, I'm with you.
So they're writing all this stuff, and what they keep coming back to over and over again is that learning is socially constructed. Learning is something that happens when you and I have an interaction. When I'm just sitting by myself, learning does not occur. Now, there is a social interaction that can take place with a computer screen, but there's a very good case to be made that it is very, very limited. And if you and I don't get a chance to actually sit down and to interact and to negotiate and to come to a common consensus about ideas and about knowledge, then you're not going to get real learning. And
which
that
is why,
one of-
I think one of my favorite quotes comes from a crazy guy, a guy named B.F. Skinner, who I actually met I actually met the daughter that he left in the box, which is just weird to me. I don't know who would do that to their child, but he did. The quote he's quoted as saying is, "Education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten."
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly to your point.
Yeah, and again, the notion that we can learn anything when we're isolated is just antithetical to what the research consensus of scholars has been. Again, last 20, 30, probably even longer than that, a number of years. So taking kids and isolating seems to me to be completely against that. Now, suppose you think this is all nerd stuff and you got no business for it. Okay, Mr. CEO, what kind of worker do you keep telling us that we need for the 21st century? I keep hearing you need creative problem solvers. I keep hearing you need people who are able to organize into teams. I keep hearing that you need people who can reach across disciplines and think creatively. Well, how are you going to get that sitting in a cubicle with a screen in front of you? You're not.
Taking bubble tests.
Yeah, if that's really what you all are saying that we need to succeed in the 21st century, then, parking kids in front of computers seems to me to be the last thing that we should be doing. Yes, they're powerful tools. Yes, it's important that we have computers in the classroom. I won't dismiss that for a second. I use technology all the time in my own classroom. But the idea that it all revolves around technology, to me, just seems loony. And it seems like the sort of stuff that the rest of the world is moving away from and we're moving toward. And do we really want to give up our economic supremacy? We're well on our way to doing it right now. Are we really going to do that next step just so that we can, convince ourselves that if we buy the latest tablet or the latest software or whatever, we're doing right by our kids rather than having well-trained, well-educated,
critical thinkers,
well-paid critical thinkers in front of those classrooms, guiding those children to become those sorts of things? We really have to, it's a question of priorities right now, and it's a question of really sitting down and thinking, and us as a nation, thinking critically about what kind of nation we want to be going into and going through the 21st century. Do we want to fall behind, or do we want to continue to be the leader? Do we want to be the nation that is, putting out the latest junk, or do we want to fire more rockets at the moon and split the atom and clean up our oceans? These things are not going to happen by parking kids in front of computers in cubicles.
Which is why,
they're simply not going to happen.
My wife and I struggle with this. I've got an 11-year-old who's going to be 12 here very soon, and I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old coming along, and we struggle with how much technology, how much computer time. My daughter doesn't have an iPhone. She's the odd girl out. Technologically, they're behind, and I worry that by not giving them unlimited access to things, that we've actually put them behind in what the future is. But I think it's important that they sit and read books and play with blocks and figure things out, do puzzles and stuff like that, rather than just click a mouse on repeatedly on killing things on a video game.
I think that's absolutely right. And I worked for years with a veteran teacher, one of the best teachers I ever worked with, and she was 38 years in as a kindergarten teacher, and one of her students grew up to win a Nobel Prize in chemistry.
Wow.
So she another failure of American public education, right? So, I'm talking to her about this sort of stuff. Like, Carol, what have you seen? What are the changes? And she said, there are too many people on their cell phones when they're with their kids. Put down your cell phone and talk to your kids. It's such a simple little thing, but it's so important because that's how children acquire language. That by hearing adult talk, they increase their vocabularies. It's critically important that they have that interaction with the parent. If we allow technology to get in the way of that, we are really creating a problem. So go back to those cyber charters. Those kids need to interact with adults. They need to learn the language that adults use. They need to see how adults solve problems, how adults negotiate issues. A computer cannot replace that. It simply cannot. So if you put 2 teachers with 100 kids, and every one of them has a whatever kind of tablet or whatever, that is not going to replace having that one teacher with 15 kids, 20 kids, and having the time to develop those personal relationships so those children can model that sort of thing, so they can learn the vocabulary of not just of school, but of life. It's so critically important. So to the larger point, yeah, you're right as a parent to be concerned about it. Mine are a little bit older. I remember going through exactly the same thing, and you struggle with it sometimes. But the big thing is that even if they do have the iPhone, or even if they do have the Wii or whatever it is, are you still sitting down as a family and having dinner? And are the screens off? And are you talking? Are you reading books? Are you playing with blocks? Are you doing all of those sorts of things that children need to do? That is work for children. That is their work. That is what they are punching the clock to do. And we shouldn't be substituting that work with something that's a little bit more fast, a little bit easier. Having said that, we've all been in the situation where it's a long car ride, and it's kind of nice to be able to give them an iPad and let them doodle around a little bit.
Here, watch this DVD while we get some mental sanity.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, at the end of it, my wife and I, we try. I go and I do the lunch bunch reading every week, and we go and we try and help with math class, and we chaperone all of the field trips and all of that stuff. Just because you're right, they need that interaction. They need that reassurance and that support, I think.
You know what? And actually, you bring up something that I think is really critical, and I think we need to talk about this on Charter School Week 2. So you're an involved parent. You're involved with your children, and part of that means getting involved in your school, right? So you're doing things. You're involved in activities, and we're all busy and we're all working hard in this America. But we're trying to make the space and we're trying to make the time to be with our children in school because it's a community. We're building a community. In a community, if someone is struggling, we don't cut them loose. And in a community, in ideal communities, we have a multiplicity of people with a multiplicity of talents. And, some people are good at some things and some people are good at other things. But we find a place for everybody and we come together. This is probably the primary concern about charter schools that really bothers me. Because when you turn it to a consumerist model, you are substituting this idea of building a community and instead saying that consumer choice, consumer loyalty trumps any sort of community loyalty. So in the same way that, I'll go to Home Depot to buy my wood screws, but if Lowe's has a good price, I'm going down the street. I don't have any more loyalty to a retailer than that, and that the whole system is predicated on that. And at the same time, Home Depot has that same feeling toward me. If they can't make a buck off of me, if I'm not their customer, they're not going to do anything to court me. If we're going to set up schools like that, we may as well just forget the idea that schools are an integral part of the fabric of our community, because the loyalties that they have to the community and that the community has to them is only at the surface level as a consumer. It is not that deep sort of civic community, civic responsibility toward each other that ideally we should have in the public school. I am very concerned about this notion, and I know that a lot of the charter schools will come out and say, hey, we are a community, we work really hard to build a community. But if you look at some of these charter schools, like the Uncommon schools, for example, the one that we have in Newark, over a 50% attrition rate between 5th grade and 12th grade.
Wow.
Yeah. If you look at Success Academies in New York City, which is Ava Moskowitz's charter school, it's been well documented, the recruitment practices that they go through, and how they simply do not provide certain services for certain kind of students that the public schools do, and that everything is based on the test, everything is based on the outcome. everything is based on what you can do rather than you being who you are. That really bothers me, and I'm afraid if we keep heading down this path, we're gonna lose something that we're gonna really regret losing in this country, and that I think is going to be nearly impossible to get back, and that's really our soul.
No, and you're right. And my daughter plays basketball. She's sixth grade. The school doesn't have a sixth grade basketball team. And in fact, from the guy who coaches the team, he says, eventually baseball, basketball, all of these things that bring people to school spirit and all of that stuff going to be gone because the AAU leagues and all of these other privatized leagues are doing so much more. They've got so much better facilities and equipment and all of this stuff because we've been starving it. And, as a parent, look, for me to put out $150 for my daughter to play basketball wasn't a huge expense for me. But I look at most people who I know who $150 just so the kid can play basketball, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And that's a very deep and long conversation about what's been happening with youth sports. But and I've written about this several times, I equate what's happening with youth sports with what's happening in education in general. That we've taken the professional mercenary attitude in sports. It's basically it's all through the NCAA right now, and frankly, that's down to Division III, and everybody I think understands that at this point. The idea of the scholar athlete has pretty much been thrown out of the window, even at places that have traditionally tried to have that. Now it's gone down to the high school level, and you're right, it is coming even into the elementary level. And again, it's this idea, what can you do for me now, rather than, you and I have a connection and we have a sense of community and a sense of loyalty. I really do think we're going to regret this. And it's no surprise to me that the rise of charter schools has been concurrent with the rise of the professionalization of high school sports, and even lower than that with what's happening with the AAU right now. We're starting to see these boutique charter schools popping up, but we're getting even public schools engaging in this very questionable behavior of recruiting kids and parents, moving their kids across district. And, at some point, there's only so many professional athletes that we're going to be able to support in this country. We got to start thinking about what the real purpose of athletics is for children, and that should be to build character. I don't see how character is being built.
Well, I mean, I look at myself, and I can only speak for myself because I know what high school football and athletics did for me. It was the only reason I graduated.
Yeah.
To be honest, after my mother passed, my grandparents didn't have any control over me whatsoever. Had it not been for the football coach who I almost punched as a ninth grader, I probably would have never finished high school, and I definitely, given that scenario, would not have been in the situation I'm in now. So for
you're
me,
telling me your high school coach was an important person to you?
Oh, he was the person who directed my anger, because when I was 13, I was a kid who came out of the ghetto. I was a kid who was just angry at everything. And this guy helped direct that, and I put him through a lot of BS because I was a troubled kid, and because of this guy, that anger and that aggression was put to arguably a more constructive aim.
Yeah, but I think that's a perfect story for Teacher Appreciation Week. What mattered to you that this guy increased your test score by some insignificant margin, which is most of what we see in a lot of these reformy policies, that the effect sizes are they're really not that substantial. Was that important, or was him being a role model for what a man is important to your life? What sticks with you? What defines your character? What makes you a success in the rest of your life? And that's what is important about teachers. That's what we should be celebrating about teachers, and all of this kind of, effectiveness, and, I can show that if you fire this many teachers, then, we'll get a 0.15 difference in their growth in this. Whatever. It's all so arbitrary when you really think about what is important. And the funny thing is, Rick, I think we all have those stories. We can all point to those people who were those teachers, those mentors in our lives who really changed their lives. I can look back at my piano teacher in my high school year, who, my high school years when I knew that this was what I was going to do with my life and what that person meant to me. We all have those people. That's what it's all about.
I'm with you. So let me ask you, last question. You got about 15 seconds. With Charter School Appreciation Week, what should we be taking from all of this?
All right. The big thing with charter schools, is this. You can't replicate them if their effects are due to having populations that have lower than average poverty. Not everybody can be lower than average. That is the critical question with charter schools.
Right there. All right, thanks so much.
We got to get to it.
Thanks so
much. All right,
much.
thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
On Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The Affordable Care Act has driven down the number of uninsured Americans. According to a Gallup poll, the percentage of Americans without health insurance is the lowest since Gallup began tracking it in 2008. A surge in enrollments in the Affordable Care Act has resulted in the number of uninsured going from 18% in the third quarter of 2013 to 13.4% in April of this year. More than 8 million people have signed up on the healthcare reform exchanges, and many more became newly eligible for Medicaid under the healthcare reform law. The American Federation of Government Employees says the Social Security Administration is considering elimination of the nationwide field office structure. The union representing Social Security Administration field office workers obtained a copy of the report outlining radical changes in Social Security customer service operations. It was prepared by a government contractor, the National Academy of Public Administration. If the Social Security Administration approves the entire plan outlined in the report, 1,250 Social Security field offices could close, 30,000 jobs would be wiped out, and face-to-face service for Social Security recipients would end. AFGE says 43 million people rely on trained staff to help them understand the complexities of the Social Security system, and if this plan is adopted, Americans will be cheated out of what they deserve. SEIU Local 1021 is spearheading efforts to get a $15 an hour minimum wage question on San Francisco's November ballot. San Francisco already has the highest minimum wage in the nation, currently $10.74 an hour. The minimum wage in San Francisco is automatically adjusted for inflation. If the SEIU-backed ballot proposal succeeds, businesses with 100 or more employees would have to pay no less than $13 an hour by 2015, $15 an hour in 2016. Businesses with fewer than 100 workers would use a longer phase-in, hitting $15 by 2017. Democrats in the U.S. Senate are getting letters from North America's building trades unions this week urging passage of the Keystone XL pipeline project. The unions are urging Senate Democrats to approve the pipeline project either as a freestanding bill or as an amendment. Sean McGarvey, president of North America's building trades unions, says the Democratic Party has a long history of supporting America's middle class and its workers. McGarvey says now is the time for Senate Democrats to demonstrate that their commitment is steadfast and not subject to changing political winds. The Communications Workers of America say the May 7th Washington, D.C. Fair Trade Rally will show that the entire progressive movement is united with labor on the need for fair trade policies. CWA wants an end to secret trade deal negotiations, and it wants true fair trade policies to replace NAFTA-style free trade agreements that it says are bad for workers. The Fair Trade Rally is expected to draw thousands to Washington to demand that the U.S. implement fair trade policies for a 21st century economy that works for everyone. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Organizing America 3 hours each night. The Rick Smith Show.
And the radio is in the hands of such a lot of fools trying to anesthetize the way that you feel. Radio is a sound salvation. Radio is cleaning up the nation. So you better listen to the voice of reason. But they don't give you any choice because they think that it's treason. So you had better do as you were told. You better listen to the radio.
Yeah, you better listen to the radio, especially the Rick Smith Show right here. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Lots of things going on. Lots of really, talking about National Charter School Week. It's one of those things that just makes me go, it's amazing that we've gotten to this place and we've allowed these charter schools to gain so much control and really to extract so much money from the public. It's one of those things that frustrating on so many levels. But you look at what's going on across the country, and for me, right now the time is ripe for people to be organizing against all of the profitizing, all of the privatizing of our commons, and of course all of the wage theft that's been going on the last 30 years. And I look out in California right now where the car wash people, the guys who work at car washes, they're organizing, saying, we've been cheated for too long. We'd like to have better wages, hours, conditions, like any workers. And now, because of this clean car wash campaign, what they're claiming is South LA has a large, growing, unionized base of car wash workers. In fact, they're saying Los Angeles is the first city in the nation that has more than a dozen unionized car washes. I wish they'd have one of those around here so I could get my car washed. I'm here to talk a little bit about the campaign and maybe how we do it here. I've asked Rosemarie Molina. She's a community organizer with the Clean Car Campaign. Rosemarie, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
So, you look at, when I was a kid, the people who did the car wash stuff, they were just transients. There were people who were just walking down the street, hey, you need a couple of bucks, and they would go work day by day. How did you get this whole thing organized?
Well, when we first started looking at this industry through research that UCLA students were doing, we thought that it was transient workers, the same that you did. It turns out that this is actually a career job. It's a special niche, and people work in these jobs typically for over 7 years, and we have a lot of members who've been in the car wash industry 20 or 30 years. We started organizing them when we noticed they were coming into a lot of legal clinics reporting massive wage theft cases, health and safety issues. The community decided to organize around it, coupled with research that was being done by students. And the first thing we thought that we could do was to pass a law. Now, a law was passed in the state of California that gave special provisions for the car wash industry, enforcing registration, and developing stricter penalties. But without enforcement, the law was nothing more than words on paper.
Right.
So it was really the organizing drive that started in 2007 that kicked everything off.
So how did you get the folks who do this? Because a lot of people are scared to death. I mean, I talk to people every day. We could really use to organize, but I don't want to be the guy. How did you break down those barriers?
I think really the conditions couldn't get much worse at the industry level. So this is part of the underground economy in LA. Workers are making a lot of times tips only, which is no wages whatsoever. So you're having guys go home after 10 to 12 hours of work with just a couple of dollars in their pocket. They're having severe health and safety issues working with acids and sulfurs. So it couldn't get any worse. So organizing for them was a way that no matter what, it was going to be better than what they had before. So, and surprisingly, organizing around that fear we've just developed a lot of leadership.
And that's a good thing, because those are the activists who then say, we should be organizing everything because they were able to do it.
It's true. I mean, you're talking about, these are non-union jobs, but these are the worst of the worst jobs. So when we organize them to have union contracts, what we're starting at is asking for basics, making sure they're paying just above minimum wage, making sure they're providing everything that's allowed by law, but most importantly, giving them a voice on the job and a process to basically make changes in the workplace and have a little bit of balance of power, which is what unions were in the beginning.
Exactly. And, to be able to have a say over the conditions, especially because I can't imagine that it's the safest kind of job. I mean, because you're in all kinds of contorted positions, and when you talk about, the machinery and stuff, because I look at the guys who work at some of the car washes that I've gone through, as you go through the automatic thing, you're talking about some pretty complicated stuff there.
You definitely are. I mean, the chain itself is dangerous. A lot of the car washes don't have covers on the chains that pull the cars to the tunnel, and people, lose limbs or get limbs caught in there. And actually, surprisingly, I think the worst part of the most complaints we get are from the chemicals, bleaches, people having problems with their lungs, coming home with partial blindness at night. That's very real, and we don't think about car washes using these industrial, commercial grade chemicals. So that's what's happening every day.
Yeah,
without gloves, without protective gear.
That's amazing. I mean, you hear that and you go, why would you subject yourself to that? Why would you put yourself in that situation? I mean, and I would have to think before you organized, before these folks had the rights on the job, that they would be considered independent contractors. So if they actually got hurt, they were pretty much on their own, right?
Actually, we don't have that much misclassification of workers. I mean, if they got hurt and they complained, they were fired. Otherwise, they just worked through it. It's pretty much what's happening there.
Oh, okay. So you didn't have a huge misclassification. They were independent contractors working for tips.
They weren't even independent contractors. I think they were just kind of ghost employees. Like, they weren't really officially on anything, on any paperwork. They were just told if they wanted a job, they can be there and do the work, but they were just going to collect tips.
So if they got hurt, I got back to my original thought. If they got hurt on the job, what happened to them?
If you got hurt, a lot of times you don't say anything. You work through it. If you say something and speak up, you are almost always fired, and that's still happening today for a lot of workers.
So no workers' comp, none of that stuff.
No, and that's actually a huge violation in the industry. Is these car washes not having workers' comp insurance.
And now, I'm hoping, and maybe you'll tell me now that they have this contract. Now I'm sure they're paying for comp and unemployment and all the other things.
Absolutely. So something that we've seen change in the industry since 2007 when we started to organize were there's health and safety conditions. We have these huge organizing drives around health and safety, workers actually being paid wages, and a decrease in tips only employees. And now through the contract, you're guaranteed all of these safeties. And these car washes definitely have workers' comp insurance. And I think that organizing around effective policy, like the car wash liquor law, is able to help us make sure that it's not just 1 or 2 or 10 car washes doing this, but that we can sort of have an overarching reach over more of the industry.
So that you raise the entire industry's standards so that you don't have bad actors and maybe take care of them. So, but let me ask you this. So since you've been organizing this, because the common mainstream media meme is that once you organize, once you unionize, once you have a contract, and maybe some say everybody goes out of business. So how many car washes have you killed since you've been organizing?
I think it's the opposite. I don't think we've killed too many. We've actually we started with 1 and 2 union car washes, and now we have 19 in the entire state. And these businesses are proving to be really successful. You can have a good car wash that's prosperous. You can provide good jobs for your workers and stay in business for a long time. And I think the communities around these car washes, now that they know the horrors of the industry, want good car washes in the neighborhood and are going to be, providing money and consumerism at these car washes.
So, I go back and I just read something the other day that the people from the Center for Union Facts, I'm not sure if you know Rick Berman and his ilk, but they keep telling me, and maybe they're wrong, but they keep saying that anytime that workers organize at places like this, they actually have no rights, and it destroys the companies. Any sign of that in your experience?
I don't actually see that right now. I think today what was special about our event celebrating the 14 union car washes in South LA was that the owners were actually proud to have union businesses and were there to celebrate with their workers, and they're definitely not talking about shutting down anytime soon.
And that's a good thing. And the reason I bring it up, and in a very snide, facetious manner, is that what we keep hearing, Rosemarie, is that that organizing somehow harms and is bad for business. And what you're saying is actually it's a two-way street. Actually, as one side does better, so does the other, and both of them do well.
Mm-hmm, they do, and I think seeing is believing. I mean, these folks can say that it's destroying business, but why don't they actually go down to South LA and take a look? And I think it's going to prove them wrong.
So give me a couple of the stories of the people that you've met throughout this, because I would imagine that there've got to be some compelling stories that have come out of this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the workers who happens to be a good friend of mine now, when we started organizing with him, he was living in the bathroom of the car wash. He was working for tips only. He was homeless, and he decided to ask one day about the union, and a manager happened to overhear him. He was fired. He started organizing with the car wash campaign. He filed a wage claim. He won a ULP for being fired for considered activity. And now he's in the process of collecting that wage claim. He filed a claim for over $100,000 for working fixed only for just a few years.
Wow.
And he won most of that. Not only that, he decided to go through a leadership program that teaches fired car wash workers how to organize. And he's now an organizer with the Labor Community Strategy Center in Los Angeles. So he went from being a homeless car wash worker working in the industry for over 10 years to being an organizer in the movement now. And he was with us today at the press conference. He's there with us every step of the way.
That's an amazing story. And the kind of stories that I think are American stories. This idea that you work hard, you play by the rules, and through that hard work and dedication and commitment, you succeed and get ahead.
Absolutely. These guys are hard workers. They're working 10 to 12 hours a day like every other American, sweating. And on top of that, they're organizing and trying to change the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen folks who do this. I wouldn't want to do it. It's a lot of work and for very low pay and for a lot of attitude. I mean, I've seen some folks who I couldn't put up with. I'd be strangling somebody.
Oh yeah, sometimes customers aren't always the nicest. I don't think they understand how much work goes into this. It really is a lot of attention to detail, and it's a skill. It's a talent. They've definitely proved me wrong when I've tried to help with car wash fundraisers. These guys are professionals at what they do.
Yeah, So how do we do what you've done in LA? How do we do that here? How do we do that across the country to make sure that workers in any industry aren't exploited, aren't put in dangerous situations, aren't abused, or in these cases ripped off?
I think what's really special that happened after we won our first contract over in the LA area was that campaign started kicking off across the nation. We had a campaign in Chicago. We have a very active, successful campaign in New York who celebrated over 6 wins just last year, 6 contract victories. We have a union car wash in San Francisco area, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I think it starts with just being educated that a lot of these industries aren't perfect, and if we just dig a little bit, we can see that if we unite, we can make things better in any industry, whether it's restaurant, hotel. It's knowing and educating yourself about the issues. I think then it's knowing the rights of the workers, and knowing the rights that you have to help these people, and then really joining together. It's not just labor. That's not the reason we have union car washes there. It's part of it, but it's also because the faith community joined hands with these workers. It's because the community in South LA, economic development, economic justice, LGBT groups, everybody really has a hand in the fight of the car wash workers, and I think that can be duplicated in any industry.
Yeah, and to me, all of those groups have interests in every industry to make sure that every job has dignity, has respect, can afford a living wage, and some measure of health security and retirement security. To me, those are the barest of minimums. So I'm glad to hear when groups are organizing. I understand you guys are affiliated with the Steelworkers Union.
Yes, we definitely are affiliated with the Steelworkers Union. They're representing 100% of our car wash worker members in LA, and I believe in the state of California. Great union, and they really stepped up to take on this industry. It doesn't really belong in any traditional union. The car wash wasn't an industry carved out anywhere, so it was a big step for them to take it on, and they've been fantastic supporting us every step of the way. They're always there for the workers, no matter what.
Yeah, well, Rosemarie Molina, I appreciate you taking time for us, telling us about the great work that you guys are doing out there in LA, and maybe, hopefully, people will take a look at it and maybe start doing some of that stuff here. The website, cleancarwashla.org, if you want more information. Rosemarie, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Conversation to press the college bar, just talking about your mother, that is Jaguar. Wear your political t-shirt and sacred college star.
For common sense, reason, and community, come together. The Rick Smith Show.
This is Berlin calling. When Berlin calls, it pays to listen.
It's May 6th, 2014, and this is Luke Vargas for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations, here to recap the day's top global news headlines in 2 minutes. At the top, you heard the voice of Axis Sally, an American-born woman who became the radio voice of the Nazis in the Second World War. Her last broadcast was 69 years ago today, 48 hours before the German surrender.
What Russia is doing in Ukraine and Crimea has a direct effect on what's happening in the Asia Pacific. They've come with their long-range aviation out to the coast of California. They circumnavigated Guam.
That was General Herbert Carlisle, commander of the U.S. Pacific Air Forces, speaking Monday about Russian military activity around the Pacific. And Russia is not the only world power moving its military assets as uncertainty grows surrounding the crisis in Ukraine. 600 U.S. troops are currently stationed in Eastern Europe to participate in training exercises with their NATO allies. In Ukraine, calm settled in on Tuesday, but this has still been the deadliest period in the country since the departure of President Yanukovych in February. 4 Ukrainian military helicopters have been downed by Russian militias in as many days, and separatist activity recently sprouted up in Odessa, an entirely new region of the country. Separatists in the eastern city of Donetsk say they'll hold an independence referendum on Sunday, an event likely to spark further tensions in the country.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I have some great news. You can now get the Rick Smith Show podcast on your iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, or Palm on demand and on the go. Get your class war to go by downloading the Stitcher app on your smartphone by going to Stitcher.com and search for The Rick Smith Show, or go to our website at thericksmithshow.com and click on our Stitcher button. Together we can, and we will, rebuild a prosperous working class and leave opportunity for our children.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
Everybody's got a price. Everybody's gonna pay. Because the $1 Million Man always gets his way.
1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So the trade numbers are in. You got to love when that comes out. And I always look forward to see what our trade deficit, what's happened there, because it's always, did it go up? Did it go down? How much of our country are we going to lose? Overall, the U.S. international trade deficit of goods and services declined. Yay! From February, which hit almost $42 billion, $41.9 billion, went down to $40.4 billion. Hey, that's a great, still $40 billion in a month that we're sending out of the country, and we're buying other people's stuff that they're not buying from us. Our trade deficit with China fell slightly from $20.9 billion in February down to $20.4 billion in March. Our trade deficit with Japan rose from $5.3 billion in February to $5.9 billion in March, and also our trade deficit with South Korea rose from $1 billion to $1.3 billion. Now, I seem to remember and help me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember when we were pushing through the chorus, the South Korean free trade agreement there, I seem to remember the argument being, Rick, it's going to create jobs. We're going to be able to create lots of jobs. It's going to be a boom. It's going to help our trade deficit. It has. It's helped our trade deficit get worse. And now here we are. We're still talking about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreements, which everyone says, from what we've been allowed to know, is going to be worse. From what everyone says is going to be horrible as we move forward. And I look at this, and I got to tell you, I'm a bit worried. I'm a bit freaked out by these massive trade deals that really, well, stick it to us. And as I go back and I think about this stuff, all of the things that we were told haven't seemed to work out. And today there was a rally, a protest, a picket, whatever you want to call it, out in Lorain, Ohio, to try and save one of these companies who makes this steel piping. The company OCTG. What's going on is you've got this South Korean company who is doing the Chinese model, and flooding the U.S. with this cheap pipe that we just can't compete with. So it's putting the company that makes this here in the U.S. out of business. This Oil Country Tubular Goods, or OCTG. And, at some level you've got to say, when we sign these agreements, on some level you say when we make these free trade agreements, we've got to enforce them, because there's supposedly some mechanisms in there that level the playing field. The problem is we don't seem to ever do it. And, just the other day we talked with David Bacon about what's going on with the Colombia Free Trade Agreement. We were told, they're going to stop throwing union people out of plans. Well, not so much. In fact, things have gotten worse. And you go, at which point do you stop and say we've got to hold someone accountable? And I guess that only comes when the billionaire class is harmed. Because when it's you and me and other working people, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's good for trade. And you go again, who do these trade deals benefit? Is it you? Is it me? The argument that we get cheap goods is ridiculous. It's ludicrous on its face. Because if you don't have any money, cheap goods don't matter. I guess you can make an argument for cheap goods. If you have to steal them and they're under the threshold of a felony, it's just a misdemeanor. So I guess the argument of cheap goods could play some kind of a role, just not a good one. So when Fast Track comes up, and it may, when all of this comes up, our goal, no on Fast Track. That's simple. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Climate change, once thought of as a problem for the future, has moved firmly into the present.
Better buckle up.
This is not about frightening people. It's about facing realities that we face today.
Green News Report special coverage.
A street collapsing after a heavy downpour in Baltimore last week is one example of extreme weather events that may be more common in the future.
Landmark U.S. report from 13 federal agencies says climate change is here and now and is a clear and present danger.
All of those clear and present dangers straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
President Obama is going to do interviews with meteorologists all across the country about a new climate change report.
Hey, that's great. Even Fox News covered the new National Climate Assessment.
I hope they ask him about Benghazi.
Yeah, there
Like the weatherman from Montana, I should ask him about Benghazi. That'd be great.
That would be totally great. Ask them about Benghazi. Idiots. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, idiots, clowns, and deniers on Fox News aside, I have been whining for the last several weeks, last several months out here in California, where we are in the middle of the worst drought on record, that it has been so hot this winter, and over the past week, in the 90s, pushing 100 degrees in April. Well, it's not just out here in California by a long shot. Oklahoma and Kansas this week hit 100 degrees, their earliest moment on record hitting those high temperatures. And now the White House has a report that speaks exactly about these problems facing this country right now when it comes to global warming.
Yep, that is the upshot of the report. Climate change is here, and it's happening now. That's what scientists from the landmark U.S. Climate Assessment Report say. It's a congressionally mandated assessment of the impacts of climate change here and in the future. It's led by the National Academies of Sciences, 13 federal agencies, and the Department of Defense. And it shows unequivocally that climate change is impacting every corner of the U.S. right now. Dr. Jerry Melillo, co-chair of the report.
It is affecting us in our pocketbooks and on our land in every region of the United States. It is changing the lives of farmers, mayors, engineers, town planners, truckers, and foresters.
The report breaks down these impacts by region and by economic sector to help public officials, planners, businesses, and individuals prepare. It says we're already seeing stronger deluges, more record floods, a longer wildfire season, deeper droughts, and heat waves are longer and more intense, just like Texas in 2011, Oklahoma over the weekend, and here in California, spiking our food prices.
And just as I've been whining about for months.
And it paints a grim picture of what's to come, warning that these impacts will accelerate unless we act swiftly on cutting emissions of greenhouse gases, predicting temperatures potentially could soar by as much as 10 degrees by 2100, melting Alaska and raising sea levels by 2 to 4 feet, threatening $1 trillion worth of U.S. coastal real estate and infrastructure.
And yet, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh today, and he says not only is none of this happening, there is absolutely no science to support it, that everything you're talking about, Desi Doyen, is based on computer model predictions for far, far out in the future. It's based on nothing that's actually happening today.
And, of course, he's absolutely, completely, 100% wrong.
How dare you?
The report also details actions that we can take right now to reduce emissions, but the political climate for action is a problem.
You think?
The climate change denial industry and Republicans are already forcefully dismissing the new scientific assessment, but White House senior advisor John Podesta says they'll fail.
They'll find various ways, particularly in the House, to try to stop us from using the authority we have under the Clean Air Act. All I would say is that those have 0% chance of working.
So if Congress wants to try to stop the president from taking action here, Podesta is saying he's going to use his executive authority to take action anyway.
Yes, and President Obama already has done so, and he is also going to issue landmark new rules for the nation's dirtiest power plants coming up in June. And EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy tells MSNBC there is good news.
The bright spot here is that we know that states and local communities across the U.S. have been taking action to reduce carbon pollution. So we can do this. That's what the president knows is our moral obligation to do.
And the clean tech sector is booming and already all over this. They're using the new report to focus on innovation and which tech sectors are positioned for rapid growth by addressing climate change.
But again, Rush Limbaugh says it's not happening. There is absolutely no science for any of this, and
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
Move along.
Move along.
for much more on today's landmark report and all the other stories we couldn't get to today, thanks White House, please check out our website, greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. You can and should find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Well, as we've been talking about, as I've been talking about with our good friend Bob Ney for the last day or two, the Benghazi thing. It looks like the Democrats, maybe they're going to play ball after all. Maybe they're going to jump into the middle and not be left on the outside. As it appears, the panel that is being the select committee that's being set up to investigate the Benghazi attacks going to have 7 Republicans and 5 Democratic members. You kind of got to go, why don't you have, if it's select, why don't you select it right down the middle? Not quite sure, and that's why we'll ask Bob. Former Congressman Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
I'm happy to be on the show.
Explain to me, how do you get this select committee of unequal power? I mean, if the idea is to get to the bottom of it and to be truthful and to investigate all angles of it, why the balance of power being skewed?
Well, I've got to be candid that historically they do this. Whatever party is in control always has the preferential numbers on the committee. For example, House Administration, there were 6 Republicans on the committee when I chaired it, 3 Democrats. When the Democratic side had it, it was 6-3. They always make this ratio. Now,
I understand that. I understand that for your regular committees and everything that's going. This is a special select committee.
Well, they still have historically done it. Now, that doesn't make it right to do, and they could have set a new trend with this thing, I mean, it's not like they're going to really, I don't think they're going to take a vote,
Okay.
necessarily. They may not necessarily take a vote.
Did you see the Jon Stewart? Did you see the Jon Stewart thing last night?
On Benghazi? No, I didn't see that.
I don't often spend time watching Jon Stewart because it's on at a different time when I'm home, but I saw the clip of it, and basically what I've been saying, what was the outrage in Iraq? Where was the outrage in Afghanistan? Where was the outrage in all of this whole litany of things? Where was the outrage then? Why now?
Well, it's very interesting on the Iraq issue because both parties just let it go. They really did. And then when the Democratic side took over the Congress, I had friends of mine that went to them and said, do something about it. Well, we'll look political. And at the end of this whole process, nobody did anything on one of the most outrageous invasions in the history of modern times. No. Nobody. So Benghazi, they pulled the trigger on this thing. I will say this one will, in a way, go beyond politics. There's either something there or there isn't. There was either a cover-up or there wasn't. Or was it just an opinion of what happened? And it could be bad intelligence given. I don't know. But I will tell you this. By doing this, John Boehner resisted this for a long, long time. He said no. What altered his mind, I don't know. Maybe he was trying to make nice, for people angry at him from the Tea Party side. I don't know.
Maybe he didn't want the tattoo of the gavel on his arm taken off. Did you see the clip with Nancy Pelosi, the tattoo gavel on her arm?
No, I didn't see
the
that.
press corps, the press corps dinner thing.
Oh, the White House dinner.
Yeah, they with Joe Biden and
he went into a tattoo place. Yeah.
And there was Nancy Pelosi getting a tattoo of a speaker's gavel on her forearm, which was probably the best part of the whole evening. I'm sure it was just that little video, but at least that's what I've been reading on the inner tubes. So at the end of looking, so you're saying there's either something really there or this is just more of the same.
Because they have went over this so many times. Now, I understand they've shifted it. They've shifted it to a better chair because Congressman Issa was a train wreck in California. They've shifted it to a guy that will handle it better. Now, having said that, even though the process is going to be handled better for the public persona, that doesn't change whether there's substance there or not.
Right.
I don't care how good he handles the Congressman Gowdy handles it. If there's no substance there, if it comes out that there's something we just don't know, and it comes out, then I would say at that point in time, then the Congress could do the right thing, take the high road, and see how you avoid these types of things in the future. But I still do go back to, I shake my head over Iraq. I'm with you, Rick. I just shake my head.
No, I didn't hear the outrage then about especially the tubes, and that's one of the things that still gets me. The aluminum tubes and the cartoon drawing of the mobile chemical labs, along with the yellow cake uranium and all the other stuff that they knew wasn't true. And yet, where was the outrage? I think Stewart was right. Where was the outrage?
One, you had Scooter Libby, who, was part of outing a CIA agent, which can get them killed, and he did that. And, of course, then the president said, well, he's already suffered enough. We'll not put him in prison. And, of course, he had the goods on Cheney, let's face it. So, we all know where that thing was headed. But I think because people supported giving the president full authority, just because they voted for it, which, hey, you make horrible mistakes, we were lied to, just because they did, for some reason they just kind of wanted to let it go away. Well, he was a bad guy.
Yeah, well, it wasn't their kids. It wasn't their kids dying. It wasn't their kids being brutalized. It wasn't their children. Just sad. Yeah. All right, let's move along. The Supreme Court yesterday, the fallout. I've got some of my friends extraordinarily happy, and in my view, way too happy. Oh, we're gonna be able to pray everywhere.
No.
Is that what that means?
No, it doesn't. For 30 years, there's been, let's call it a carve-out for legislative bodies. When I was in Congress every day, we started the Congress with a prayer. And then the House and Senate across the United States, the state legislatures do the same thing. This extends it under certain conditions with support or approval to other bodies like city councils, etc. Now, I talked to a guy yesterday. I was just curious. I said, what do you think? He said, well, this is great, and I said, well, how about if somebody offers a Omani Padme Hum Buddhist prayer or a, Allahu Akbar Muslim prayer? And he said, no, this is a Christian country. So I immediately thought, okay, if people actually, some people want to believe this mandates a Christian prayer, they had better think again. It can be all kinds of prayers.
Yeah.
So I see the potential for an argument there. People will take this to be, that you can do prayer just about anywhere you want without separation of church and state, but this is limited to legislative bodies like councils, county government.
So what happens then because I brought this up last night with our friend Ian Millhiser from the Center for American Progress, and I asked him what happens if the guy I went to high school with, who was an avowed Satanist, what if he wants to go to the town hall meeting and give his prayer because it's an honest belief, he truly believes it? And what about the Pastafarians, and what about all of the other ones? Do we end up having every legislative meeting being started with 15 different prayers?
Well, they won't do that. And what they will do is they'll bang the gavel and say, you're not giving a Satanist prayer, and then they'll frankly curry a lot of favor in their community. Now, I can see scenarios, going on here. I mean, look at the both sides of the aisle jumping to claim what a great thing this was. I mean, it was all over the place. It was Kumbaya Day in Washington, D.C. It's in a limited scope. But again, people will take this. I heard a guy say yesterday, "Oh, we got prayer in school again." No, no, we don't. No, we don't.
Right. Well, I mean, that's coming. They're still doing it. I mean, at the end of the day, they've got the prayer around the flagpole and all the other stuff that they do. And at the end of the day, I've always said, look, if you want to pray with your children, do like we do at the Smith household. Get up with them a couple of minutes early, maybe a couple of minutes before they go to bed, before meals, whatever it is you do, but doing it in the confines of your own home. That's the way you go about it. When did praying become a spectacle?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were in a restaurant it was about a year ago, and there was a table in the middle, and I know they demanded that middle table. Guy stood up and gave a 15-minute sermon before the meal that everybody in the restaurant had to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we were leaving. But, and who knows what he was rambling on about, but it was just, this kind of spectacle is just nonsense.
Well, and also, I was raised Catholic. We say in there in the Apostolic Creed, one true Catholic Church. So, I mean, do we want to go down that path, starting to the denominational thing?
Oh, I've been saying for years, I can't wait till we finally decide that we are, quote unquote, a Christian nation, so that then we can decide which sect. And watch them kill each other and maim and attack and all of the things that they do so well. Then that will be entertainment. Maybe we can put that on one of the cable networks that aren't doing so well.
That's true.
Let's move along. Climate change back in the news. It's bad, and in fact worse than we thought, right?
Well, yes. I started to surf, and I didn't have enough time, unfortunately, but I started to surf the site, and I found it remarkable. I mean, it goes all over the United States and goes into great detail of water resources or the air, and it's the National Climate Assessment, if somebody wants to Google it. But the White House unveiled it today. Now, it was interesting. Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, Republican of the United States Senate, and I don't know if I have him quoted exactly, but he said some fascinating things about the fact that the Obama administration was using this to hurt the middle class. He would use this to hurt the middle class. Now he's talking about, jobs and
Gee,
things,
where have I heard that before?
This one is, this is just saying point blank this thing. And it's not global warming. Unfortunately, the word warming 20 years ago, whoever thought that one up, people say, well, look, we had the coldest winter.
Yep.
It's climate change.
Right.
And it's the entire, as you know, the entire process. So it's dire warnings. Everything we are seeing, I know in my lifetime, I'll be 60 years old, and I can tell you, haven't seen this many storms and tsunamis, etc. It's just saying it's going to be there. It's going to get worse.
It's disaster capitalism at its best. We continue to screw. And Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, said, "Well, we've evolved because we've been able to adapt." And he said, "Climate change is real. It's going to happen." Yeah, well, it's going to happen. We just have to figure out how to profit from it and evolve. And it's interesting that you brought it up that people have. For their own self-interest and under the guise of jobs, because just earlier in the program I quoted an article in the local newspaper that said, because there was a big drilling rally here in Harrisburg this afternoon, and it said the article said, quote, the crowd talked to themselves during the droners, the speakers who were just rambling on, but perked up to boo the Delaware River Basin Commission and environmentalists who want to shut down our opportunities in the name of water quality and the environment. Yeah, how dare they want clean water and a clean environment?
Oh, I'm from the coal fields of eastern Ohio, and of course, when you get around certain areas, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And it's just due to the economy, the jobs, etc.
But for me, it's that kind of false choice, though. I mean, you're given false choices. Okay, you're going to starve to death, or you're going to die 10 years earlier because of the effects of what it is you're doing. Which choose? It's like which size gun would you like? Would you like a 22 or a 44? You decide. It's pretty simple.
It's about a balance, and there can be a balance there. And there were attitudes when I was a kid. You burn the coal, you burn it dirty. Who cares? Soot came down on the cars and on our back porch. Who cared? And then we soon learned you'll die from it.
Yeah.
So we can burn it. We just have to put on adapters and clean coal technology, etc. Of course, eventually we have to get it to an entirely new fuel process and off of fossils.
Yeah. And that's the goal down the road. Look, nobody's saying we end all of it right now, this minute, but you have to have a plan that 5, 10, 20, 50 years down the road to go, okay, you know what? The technology will be there in the future. We'll continue to invest and develop and do these things so eventually we get off of it. I mean, at this point, I don't even know that we're really having that conversation of the next generation. Are they going to be still hooked to the stuff that we're on?
Since King Faisal cut our oil off under Carter, we have complained and this and that, and we have never, ever, ever had a true energy policy all of those years since the 70s.
And that's
just
insane.
has not happened.
It's insane to me how we don't learn. I mean, I look at 9/11. We didn't learn from all the hijackings of the 70s when they said all you have to do is harden the cockpit doors, no more hijackings. Now you had 9/11. Have they even hijacked? Have they even hardened the cockpit doors now? I don't even know.
I think they've taken a lot of measures, and of course there was a discussion of arming the pilots, etc.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
But it took for years and years and years to get them to get secure doors that wouldn't be kicked in by a kid.
It's like that's a real good idea. My one friend who's a cop said, You know, how many cops get killed on the job? What the percentage of cops killed on the job with their own gun within 3 feet is much higher than any other way of dying on the job. Because you got the gun, they take it away from you, shoot you with it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well. And finally, the banks, are they too big to jail? Or have we finally come to our senses and realized that maybe these criminals we should be locking up behind bars along with the petty drug offenders and the petty criminals that we seem to be profiting off of?
Well, the Attorney General, Eric Holder, a year ago made a misstep in the sense that he said, something to the effect that banks were, just too big to have criminal charges and the repercussions of it. He, after he said that, a couple months later, he said, well, no, he's having some change of opinion. Now he's coming out with it today, and I think it's a very, very important statement. And his question is basically this: can prosecutors bring criminal charges against a bank without rocking the financial system? And there is this perception out there, Rick, and you and I have talked about this, there's this perception, if you take the president of the bank out or the leader of the bank or the chairman of the board, et cetera, the whole bank gets shaky, you can't put them in prison. So what we have tended, well, what we do in America, you hear these big fines. They were assessed $1 billion. They were assessed $300 million. Well, you know what? They might have made $600 million through illegal or fraudulent practices, and they paid a $150 million fine and pocket $400 million.
Yep.
So obviously, it's not just about the fines. In fact, think about this logically. Why would giving a fine of $300 million, wouldn't that, quote, rock the institution financially? So it's okay to take out $300 million and tell investors in the bank, oh, we just took out $300 million, but don't worry about it. But you can't put the president of the bank in jail. I don't get that. This has always been a protectionist thing for these banks.
Yeah, I have no idea. At the end of the day, the people who made the bad decisions don't we live in a meritocracy? Don't we hear that nonsense all the time? You screw up, you pay the piper. What happened to the old Beretta thing? You're older than me. That the TV show. You do the crime, you do the time. We should be locking these people up.
Yeah, and so the Attorney General said that he's done a video message, and he said when it comes to corporate wrongdoing, there's no such thing as too big to jail. And he said that in a video he released yesterday. But again, how they got such protectionism over the years, it's amazing.
I can only imagine that it comes down to how much money they put into the coffers of the campaigns, because it seems to be bipartisan. I mean, other than a handful of Democrats, you don't see anybody out there really beating the drum for these people to go to jail. Even right after the collapse happened, there wasn't a huge political cry to be locking people up. I was saying we should be seeing 6 o'clock perp walks all the time.
Yes, but what they then did is they went through the system, and you want to open an account for your grandchild on the Uniform Gift Act, you have to actually physically produce the Social Security card. They made everything tighten up for the users. They just didn't make it tighten up for the offenders.
Yeah.
And here's the thrust of the matter, which is absolutely ridiculous. This could be changed in 10 seconds. The Attorney General and others have been worried that if they arrest somebody, then the bank could lose the federal charter. The Congress in 10 seconds can pass a law that says, if you're criminally charged, the bank doesn't lose its charter. That person goes away. Do the banks have that much power? Financial Wall Street have that much power with the Congress? They can't change that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, you answered my rhetorical question.
I mean, it's not rhetorical. I mean, because you're right. If it's not rhetorical, and the answer is they have that kind of power.
They have it then. Yeah.
Because I would have thought you take the president. There's always a vice president. He can step his way up, and maybe by doing that, by treating them as criminals, maybe you stop them from doing criminal things. Just a thought.
True.
It just is what it is. Bob, it's always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Okay, thank you.
Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
The gabillionaire Koch brothers feel entitled to occupy the people's elections. barging in with sacks full of corporate cash. So how would the brothers feel if people barged into their political affairs? To find out, a few citizens recently paid a visit to Coke Company's public grandiose name the brothers give to their Washington, D.C. lobbying headquarters. From there, a covey of high-dollar, coke-headed sapsucker lobbyists flits all around town trying to get lawmakers to take away our Social Security, Medicare, minimum wage, etc., while also making sure that the two free enterprise proselytizers keep getting their billion-dollar-a-year package of government subsidies. So some commoners came calling on the Cokes. Okay, it was more than some, more like 600. They're affiliated with National People's Action, a scrappy grassroots network of farmers, workers, clergy, retirees, environmentalists, students, and just plain folks. The visitors occupied the grand lobby of the lobbyist building, forming a picture-perfect contrast between the powers that be and the powers that ought to be. First, a couple of ministers in the NPA group called on the Cokes to repent their narcissistic political push to pervert our democracy into their privatized plutocracy. Then, several of the out-of-towners gave personal testimony about the real-life impacts that the Cokes' extremist ideological agenda is having. Patricia Fuller, for example, told of struggling to make it on Michigan's $7.40 an hour minimum wage, then asked why the billionaires would spend millions to knock it even lower. Or, as Charles Koch advocates, eliminating America's wage floor entirely. This is Jim Hightower saying, of course, the visitors were tossed out. But their point was made. It's time to toss these corporate oligarchs out of the people's business.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I got a bad case, I'm turning it up, it's been cold in here, so fire it up. I got a bad case, I'm turning it up, it's been cold in here, so somebody fire it up.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. And, of course, if you missed any portion of the program, the podcast there at the website, highly, highly suggested. Share it with your friends. Say, hey, listen to this. We need to expand. We need to get the message out. We need to grow. And in the coming weeks and months, there are going to be some big changes here at the program. We're going to be moving our live time from 9 to midnight to noon to 3. And I know there's some folks who are going to be saying, well, that's not my lifetime. Well, we're looking to be able to expand and to do some bigger things. So our hope is the live hours will give more people the opportunity to participate. Our experiment in choosing this time was that we would have interaction and we would have the ability to grow out of this. Oddly enough, our growth area has been during the daytime in the noon to 3 spot. So that's where we're going to be moving come the beginning of June. The reason this is important and the reason I think this is a good move is because we do an awful lot of functions during the day. We end up going to a lot of places, and this is going to give us an opportunity to take the program to places during the day and really have some impact where we go. And Netroots Nation's coming up. We're going to be there in Detroit. I think that's in the middle of June. AFSCME's national convention is coming up. We want to go to that. The building trades here in Pennsylvania are having one of their conferences. We want to go to that. But we also want to go, like today, for instance. We talked about it last night, that the Geisinger Lewiston Hospital employees went on a one-day strike. We would like to be able to go to those during the hours when it's going on. And I think it's going to give us a really great opportunity to get into some stuff. So while this time slot was decided on solely to be able to grow out of our want, our need is to be able to go out and stir stuff up, and that's where we're going to be going. So we hope that we'll still be on some stations where we're at. But we hope that you'll give us some feedback and let me know what you think. Again, Stitcher, smartphone, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like time flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, and amorous ray. Democracy is coming to the USA.
Storm out on the horizon, the clouds grow dark in the midnight sky.